Can 2 seconds change your life? Thomas Reiner. Introduction. Have you ever read a book and when you got to the end thought, man, I really wish you would have told me that at the beginning because I probably wouldn't have read all this? Well, I'm going to save you from that feeling right now. This is a book about how 2 seconds changed my life. Those 2 seconds helped me improve my health and well-being, build better relationships, get promoted, earn more money for my family, become a better leader, and achieve goals and go places I never thought I would. If you've never read 2 Second Lean by Paul Akers, you need to. Paul is a successful businessman, entrepreneur, international speaker, and lean expert. One day, while trying to get an employee to make an improvement in his factory, the employee claimed they couldn't think of anything to improve. Paul asked, "Can you come up with something to save just 2 seconds of time?" The employee said, "Well, of course." Paul replied, "That's all I'm asking you to do." That simple question sparked a lean reformation. Eventually, Paul wrote Second Lean, and when I read that book and applied its principles, my life changed dramatically. Now, let me get straight to the point. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to be successful in just a few short paragraphs. Whether or not you choose to keep reading after that is up to you. Here's the truth. If you want to make a tremendous difference in your life, start with this. Sharon. My life would be a mess without my personal relationship with Jesus Christ. There's a ton of information out there about this, but if you don't have a relationship with Him, I would encourage you to start one. Read these 3 books. 2 Second Lean, Lean Health, Lean Life. Now I know this part might sound like an infomercial where someone says, if you only buy this product for $19.99, it will completely change your life. The crazy thing is, it's true. But here's the best part. You don't have to pay $19.99. You can get all of these books for free online. Listen to them as many times as you want. If you do this and apply what you learn, your life will change completely. Of course, the application requires effort. Even though what's in these books is simple, it still takes action. Let me boil it down to just 3 basic points. Treat people with respect. See waste and eliminate it. Repeat. That's it. Treat people with respect, which can take many forms. Learn to see waste in your life, and then eliminate it. Keep doing this over and over, and your life will get infinitely better. Still not convinced? Keep reading, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Chapter 1. Grounded in Hard Work. I grew up in Amherst County, Virginia, nestled in central Virginia, with the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains as a backdrop. I had great parents and grandparents, all of whom were hardworking. My family came from a blue-collar background, and not many in my extended family had gone to college. One set of my grandparents had lived through the Great Depression, and you could tell by the way they worked and saved. My dad started his career as a machinist, eventually transitioning into a salaried position as an engineering technologist. Later, he went back to college, earned his degree, and moved into management. He spent over 40 years with the same large company, where he managed hundreds of people, purchased over $100 million worth of equipment, and became a machining expert. I say all that to emphasize that my family knew how to work hard, and that's exactly how I was brought up. During grade school and high school, I struggled academically and counted myself fortunate to get C's. Those C's required hours and hours of studying, and yet I never enjoyed reading or anything school-related. My first 2 years at community college were no different. I couldn't find any interest, and my grades reflected it. At the time, I was working at my uncle's cabinet shop, where I learned what it meant to work in less than ideal conditions while producing some of the highest quality work imaginable. There was no air conditioning, and the only heat came from an old wood stove. Despite those conditions, the cabinets we built were magnificent, and people came from all over to have my uncle craft cabinets for them. Eventually, I dropped out of college and started working at a local machine shop that produced archery products. I assembled and inspected parts and eventually worked my way up to becoming a machinist in training. After some time, I left that company and went to work at the same place where my dad worked. It was a massive company. Our plant alone had over 2,500 employees. Because the company did work for the government, employees were required to obtain a security clearance from the Department of Energy. When I started, I didn't have my clearance yet, so I began working in the company's waste treatment facility. The company was so large that it treated its own wastewater. My role there involved supporting basic processes, including wiping down sanitary residue from the sides of tanks. I literally started at the bottom, both literally and figuratively, within the company. Eventually, I took another hourly position in the metallurgical laboratory, preparing samples for inspectors to analyze. During this time, I finally finished my associate degree at the local community college. Still, I had no love for reading. After some time, an engineering technologist position opened up in development engineering. I applied, got the job, and worked on developing the company's latest product over a 5-year period. I learned an incredible amount and met some amazing people. At the end of that development period, an opening in the process improvement group became available. After an extensive interview process, I was selected, along with several others, to join the group. Chapter 2: The Beginning of Misunderstanding. I was sent to Lean Six Sigma training. For those unfamiliar, Lean is a methodology focused on eliminating waste and improving flow to create value, while Six Sigma focuses on reducing variation in processes through statistical analysis. At least that is what they tell you in the training. My training was spread across 5 weeks over a 6-month period. It was intense, full of statistics, which I struggled with, countless hours of mentoring, and more presentations to senior management than you could imagine. After meeting numerous requirements, I certified as a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Shortly afterward, I was asked to stay and work toward my Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt certification. To achieve that, I took additional training in design for Six Sigma and several other lean-focused classes. I even took a course in target analysis and vulnerability assessment. For that, I traveled to Washington, D.C., where I was trained by a former FBI bomb expert and a former CIA officer. It was a shortened version of the same methodology taught to the 3-letter agencies. I worked on large-scale projects and was eventually certified as a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. This certification required even more training, mentoring others, teaching classes, and completing additional projects. Eventually, I went back to school and earned my bachelor's degree. I wanted to move into management, but despite several attempts, I wasn't able to make that jump. For the next several years, I continued working in process improvement. I led improvement projects for nearly every department in the plant, traveled to sister sites to assist with their efforts, visited Department of Energy facilities, and even helped design small modular nuclear reactors. By then, I had mentored hundreds of people, worked on dozens of projects, and become proficient in statistical analysis. Most people considered me an expert in Lean Six Sigma. Here was the problem. I was clueless about what Lean was really about. Although I was considered a Lean Six Sigma expert, I was, in reality, only a Six Sigma expert. There are plenty of businesses and organizations that rely heavily on Six Sigma, but for most, I don't think they truly need it. Six Sigma is loaded with tools, statistics, and analysis. There are certainly times when that level of rigor is necessary, like if you're producing something where a mistake could cause catastrophic consequences. In those cases, performing detailed statistical analysis before making changes is essential. But for the majority of improvements, you don't need all the baggage that comes with Six Sigma. I had been trained on Lean, and I knew the textbook definition. but I didn't truly understand lean. I like to say that I had a head knowledge of lean, but I didn't understand it in my heart. Sure, I knew some of the tools. I had even worked on span reduction projects and trained hundreds of people in 5S, but I still didn't get it. Let me give you an example. The first time I saw 5S's, I got very excited. For context, 5S is a methodology for organizing workspaces to improve efficiency and reduce waste. It stands for sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. I was so enthusiastic about it that I jumped headfirst into implementing it at the company. But then I had another idea. I thought we should implement 5S at home. So I started it in my kids' bathroom. I pulled everything out from under the cabinet, drew in shadows for toilet paper and other items, and expected everyone to put things back where they belonged. As you might guess, my wife and kids were not impressed. I have an amazing wife, and my kids are great, but they weren't on board with this new system, and they didn't follow through. At the time, I couldn't understand why it had failed. I thought I was doing the right thing, but the truth is, I was so focused on getting everyone else to conform to my idea of how things should look and work that I completely missed the point. During this period, I also couldn't tell you what the 8 wastes were. For reference, the 8 wastes in lean are overproduction, inventory, transportation, defects, excess processing, excess motion, waiting, underutilized potential. Understanding the 8 wastes is one of the most basic principles of lean, and I couldn't even name them. What I found interesting over the years is that most people I meet who call themselves lean experts can't name them either. Like me, they knew how to use the tools, but they don't truly understand lean. Little did I know that all of this, along with a bunch of pigs, was laying the foundation for how 2 seconds would change my life. Chapter 3: When Dreams Meet Reality. My wife Jenny and I have been married for over 25 years. We've always been interested in owning a farm. Even when we were dating, we would drive by farms and dream about owning one. 15 years into our marriage, that dream became a reality when we bought our farm. It's a beautiful piece of property in Amherst, Virginia, nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The farm spans 30 acres, mostly fields, but with some wooded areas. There are multiple springs on the property, and one moderately flowing creek. The sunsets on the farm are breathtaking, with vibrant reds and oranges lighting up the sky. The sunrises are equally stunning, and the surrounding mountain views only add to the beauty. To get to the house, you leave the small town of Amherst and drive about 15 minutes on a 2-lane paved road. After several turns and another mile or two, you turn onto a dirt and gravel road and drive nearly a mile farther. Then you cross the Buffalo River by driving over a wash-over bridge. From there, it's another half-mile up the driveway, winding through wooded areas and open fields, until you finally reach the house. The 30 acres are bordered by an 800-acre farm, a 120-acre property, and a 110-acre parcel owned by a neighbor who lives about a quarter mile behind us. The farm is truly in the middle of nowhere, and you can't see a single house around. We were interested in farming because we wanted to raise our own food and ensure we were eating the best quality possible. When we bought the farm, we had just 3 chickens. We couldn't wait to get more animals. And before we knew it, we had dozens of chickens and started selling eggs. Things escalated quickly. Soon, we had goats, cows, ducks, horses, and pigs. As word spread, people began requesting our products, and we decided to sell even more. What started with 3 pigs grew to 40 pigs, 5 to 7 cows, and more chickens than we could count. It felt like the farm exploded overnight. We were buying fencing, building chicken coops, growing our social media presence, lining up meat processors, and delivering products, all while I worked a full-time job, and Jenny homeschooled the kids The challenges of running a new business were compounded by the fact that our inventory wandered around at will and occasionally tried to leave the property without telling anyone. To make matters worse, predators frequently stole or killed our animals, leaving us in a constant battle to keep them safe. We were determined to farm in a way that respected both the land and our animals, but that often put us at odds with modern farming practices. We were committed to making it work, but the stress and workload were starting to take a toll on both of us. I was getting up at 4 a.m. to feed the hogs, then working a 10-hour day before coming home to do evening chores. Afterward, I would crash, exhausted. Jenny would wake up, do morning chores, homeschool the kids, nurse sick baby goats back to health, and sometimes wrestle newborn calves out of creeks in torrential downpours, all while trying to keep our old farmhouse warm. We were buying thousands of pounds of feed, doing heavy manual labor without a tractor, and sometimes we didn't even have a truck. One time, we moved calves in the back of an FJ Cruiser. We still laugh about the picture we took that day. My young daughter peering over the back seat in shock as she stared at 400 pounds of cow crammed into the back of the FJ. Needless to say, after a while, we couldn't keep up. The growth, the maintenance, and all the unexpected things that go wrong on a small farm overwhelmed us. Jenny and I were both frustrated, and we began talking seriously about giving up on our dream and getting rid of all the animals. Chapter 4, a hard reset. To complicate matters on the farm, a job headhunter reached out to me in 2014, recruiting me for a position at another manufacturing plant still within driving range of the farm. I was happy where I was, but this opportunity seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime chance. It offered a senior management role in a much smaller company and focused on process improvement. I visited the site, interviewed, and immediately hit it off with the general manager. A month or so passed, and before I knew it, I had left the company I'd been with for 16 years to start a new adventure. The new company was growing, and the plant manager was a strong supporter of lean. He hired me because he believed I could help him. When I arrived, we were busy setting up assembly lines for large components to flow down, trying to implement 5S's, and dealing with all the struggles that come with running a manufacturing plant in a very small town. This was the first time I truly realized that I didn't understand lean as well as I thought I did. I knew plenty of tools and techniques, but the plant manager's experience far outpaced mine. We set up assembly lines for massive components, some weighing nearly 50,000 pounds, that required complex handling and moving processes. One of the most valuable things I learned during this time was the importance of a daily line walk, also known as a Gemba walk. Every morning at 8 o'clock, senior management would meet on the factory floor and walk to each assembly line, sub-assembly line, and the fabrication and welding shops. In an hour, we covered the entire factory floor, which stretched over half a mile. We would identify issues, discuss challenges, and prioritize what needed to be resolved. It was an incredibly effective way to get management out where the real work was being done and see firsthand what the struggles were. After some time, the general manager who hired me moved on to another company. We had become good friends while tackling significant challenges together, and I hated to see him leave. Unfortunately, the resistance to lean in this factory was intense. The interim general manager wouldn't even allow us to use the word lean around him. To make matters worse, new product rollouts were not going smoothly. Toward the end of my time there, one major product launch went so poorly that the company's international headquarters gave us 3 months to turn the plan around. It was an impossible task. That demand created pressure, and people began behaving in ways that were not appropriate. I gave it some time, but eventually I decided to return to my previous company. I was incredibly thankful for the opportunity to go back, but I returned humbled, fully aware that I didn't know as much about lean as I thought I did. I was essentially starting over. I had taken a risk, leaving a stable position to work for a company trying to implement lean, and it had turned into a disaster for me. This time, while waiting to regain my security clearance, I found myself sitting in a bare office with white walls, little to do, and plenty of time to think. That's when I discovered the power of 2 seconds. Chapter 5: The Red Pill Moment. In retrospect, leaving my company and coming back in 2015 turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. I spent 9 hours a day in that little bland office, and since I didn't have much to do, I started watching YouTube videos on lean. A coworker had sent me one of Paul Akers' videos, and I watched it. It was a recording of an hour-long presentation he had given on lean. I had sat through hundreds and hundreds of hours of training on process improvement, worked on countless projects, and read multiple books on lean. But I had never heard anyone explain it the way he did. Paul spoke with energy and confidence, and had first-hand experience to back up what he was saying, something many consultants lack. Paul wasn't a consultant. He was just someone who had seen the power of lean and wanted others to experience what it could do for them. After that first video, I watched another, and another, and another. I couldn't stop watching the videos Paul had created. Paul had also written the book 2 Second Lean, so I read that too. Many of his videos featured himself or his employees showing what they were struggling with and the small improvements they had made to fix those struggles. The improvements were often so small that most people wouldn't even consider them worth the effort. An example would be using non-stick spray in the kitchen. Every day, you pull the spray out, take off the cap, spray the pan, and then put the cap back on. Taking the cap off and putting it back on serves no purpose. It's pure waste. Paul simply threw the cap away. Now, he never had to mess with the cap again. At first glance, it seemed ridiculously small, 2 seconds small. But when you do something every day or multiple times a day and compound that over years, it adds up to a mountain of process improvement. At that time, Paul had around 1,000 videos on his website, and I eventually watched every single one of them. To this day, I suspect I've watched more of his videos than anyone else in the world. When I wasn't watching Paul's videos, I was watching videos of his company, FastCap, which featured similar improvements. Paul also highlighted videos from other companies that had started following his process, and I watched those too. By watching these videos, I began to see waste. I had never noticed it before, but suddenly, I could see it everywhere, in everything I did and in every part of my life. Once I saw the waste, I couldn't unsee it, and it drove me crazy. I compare this realization to the red and blue pill in the Matrix. Once you know, and you can't ignore it. You have to do something about it. Slowly, I started making my own improvements. There's something incredibly rewarding about spotting something that bothers you, waste, making a small improvement, and then immediately benefiting from that change. It's satisfying on a level that's hard to describe, and it's infectious. After I made a few improvements, I decided to take a risk and share one of my videos with Paul. I found his email address on his website, or maybe it was in his book. Either way, I was surprised that he had made his contact information so accessible. He was speaking all over the United States, he was very successful, and he had a massive following on YouTube. I figured someone like that wouldn't want just anyone to be able to email him, but I took a chance. I made a video showcasing one of my improvements and sent it to Paul. To my shock, within a few hours, I had a response. Not only had this incredibly busy and successful person replied, but he also complimented my video and asked for my permission to use it in an upcoming presentation he was giving. That was when things really started to get wild. Chapter 6: The Lean Awakening. I kept making improvements, and slowly I began to see things changing on the farm. Around this time, I started thinking about farming and lean on a higher level. Farmers have some of the toughest jobs in America, and the American farmer is an endangered species. I decided to create my own YouTube channel to share lean principles with farmers. Slowly but surely, my channel began to grow, and I started gaining subscribers. Each time I made a video, I shared it with Paul. Whenever I did this, Paul would critique my work. One of the aspects I love about Paul is that he's an excellent mentor. He will tell you when something is good, and he will tell you when it needs improvement. There were times when he raved about my videos and sent them out in mass emails. Other times, he would say, "Thomas, you can do better," and then provide specifics on what needed to improve. Some people don't like this kind of coaching or feedback, but I loved it. Not only were my videos improving, but my understanding of lean was growing exponentially. It's one thing to say you know lean, but making videos to demonstrate it helps you learn it on a much deeper level. I also wanted to start making improvements at home again, but I knew I needed to do it differently this time. What Paul had taught me was that you can't change anyone else. You can show people what you are doing, and then it's up to them to decide if they want to do something differently. Worry about yourself, not others. As Paul would say, you have enough waste to last a lifetime, so start working on making it better. A good analogy for this is what they tell you on a commercial flight. If the oxygen masks drop, put yours on first, and then help others. Another way to say it, as the Bible puts it, is don't worry about the speck of dust in someone else's eye when you have a beam in your own eye. This time I started in the bathroom again, but I started in our bathroom, Jenny's and mine. Instead of jumping in and making a ton of changes like before, I just started cleaning it. This may not seem like a big deal to most people, but I had never cleaned our bathroom in all those years of marriage. Let me explain. When we got married, we divided up the household chores, and my wife took that one. So, when I started cleaning the bathroom, it didn't take long for Jenny to notice. Over time, I began making small improvements in the bathroom, like organizing all of my supplies using Kaizen foam. I didn't touch any of Jenny's items, just mine. Between these small changes and getting my family's input on my videos, they slowly started to understand lean. Eventually, they began making their own massive improvements, but that's a story for another chapter. Next, I had to learn how not to learn the 8 wastes. Chapter 7, How Not to Learn the 8 Wastes. When I was trained on Lean Six Sigma, they obviously went over the 8 wastes. They always taught it using some type of acronym. Frankly, the acronyms are lame, but that's how all the consultants teach the 8 wastes. I'd heard them all before. Tim Wood, downtime, you name it. Each letter stands for one of the 8 wastes. Despite hearing these acronyms countless times, I could never actually name all the 8 wastes. Sure, I could rattle off a few, but I couldn't list them all. As I mentioned before, many people I've met over the years who call themselves lean experts or enthusiasts also couldn't name the 8 wastes. I never understood why until I was introduced to Paul Akers. If you learn the 8 wastes using an acronym, you don't actually learn the 8 wastes. You just memorize an acronym. The first time I heard Paul explain the 8 wastes, he was eating a burrito. That video has over 8,000 views, and I'm pretty sure a good number of those are mine. Paul's approach was simple and effective. Tell a story. You can teach the 8 wastes using just about anything as an example. The story usually follows this order: overproduction, inventory and transportation, defects, excess processing, excess motion, waiting, wasted potential. Once you explain the 8 wastes in a story, you'll remember them. Let me give you some examples. At the doctor's office, overproduction. The office overbooks patients. Scheduling more than a single doctor can reasonably see. Inventory. This overproduction creates excessive patient inventory, everyone waiting for their turn. Transportation. Once you're in the office, they move you back and forth to multiple stations. Defects. They frequently make errors, asking you the same questions repeatedly. Excess processing. Those repeated questions are a perfect example of excess processing. Excess motion. Nurses walk back and forth searching for information, paperwork, or supplies. Waiting. This waste is so common they even name an entire room after it. The waiting room. Wasted potential. All this waste squanders the potential of doctors, nurses, receptionists, and of course, you as the patient. In manufacturing, overproduction. Producing more parts than the downstream process can handle. Inventory. This results in excess inventory on the shop floor. Transportation. All that inventory must then be moved around the plant. Defects. During transportation and storage, parts inevitably get damaged or become defective. Excess processing. Those defects require rework and repairs. Excess motion. Fixing defects causes unnecessary movement of workers and materials. Waiting. All that rework and repair delays the parts, leading to more waiting, wasted potential. The entire process wastes the potential of workers, equipment, and time. At an amusement park, overproduction. Loading large batches of people onto rides at one time. Inventory. This creates long lines of waiting people. Transportation. Lines force customers to move through endless queues. Defects. Frustrated customers or breakdowns in the ride itself. Excess processing. If a ride fails, staff must redirect people to other attractions. Excess motion. Both workers and customers experience unnecessary movement. Waiting. The result? Guests spend most of their time waiting in lines. Wasted potential. All of this wastes the customer's time and the staff's potential to provide a better experience. On the farm, at the time, I hadn't come across too many people applying lean principles to farming, so I decided to take the 8 wastes and apply them to what we were doing on the farm. Overproduction. Farmers often overproduce hay, getting up more than they need at one time. Inventory. This results in massive inventories of hay bales sitting in fields or barns. Transportation. The hay has to be moved from the fields to the barn and then back to the fields. Defects. If the hay sits out in the rain, a minimum of 10% of the bale is wasted. Excess processing. Farmers move hay bales repeatedly to deal with weather or animal locations. Excess motion. Using tractors to pick up, load, and unload hay bales creates extra work. Waiting. While all this is happening, the cows are waiting for their feed. Wasted potential. All of this wastes the farmer's potential for making other improvements, wasting the potential of animals. During this time, I also realized that farmers often waste the potential of their animals. This completely changed how I thought about our animals and how we could use their unique skills to help us. For example, I turned pigs loose on an overgrown section of the farm. Within a few months, they'd cleaned up all the briars, brush, and unwanted plants. The pigs did all the work for me, and they loved every minute of it. The next time you need to explain the 8 wastes, don't rely on acronyms. Tell a story. If you do, people will remember it. And more importantly, they'll understand it. Chapter 8, A View from the Summit. I kept making small improvements, kept making videos, and kept being mentored by Paul. During this time, my approach to my job started to change. I became a better employee by focusing solely on making myself better. I didn't get caught up in the usual distractions that spin people up and prevent them from doing their jobs. I just kept improving, and soon people began commenting on the changes I was making. Around this time, Paul mentioned that he was going to hold a lean summit at FastCap, his company located in Bellingham, Washington, that September. He had hosted a similar event the previous year, but it was more of a gathering of lean minds. This time it was going to be an international summit, and it sounded incredible. Then Paul shocked me. He asked me to speak. The plant where I worked agreed to send me, seeing it as an opportunity for me to learn from some of the best lean minds. Before I knew it, the day came for me to leave. I boarded a flight to Charlotte, North Carolina, and after a short layover, took a 5-hour flight to Seattle. It was my first time visiting Washington State, and I was struck by its beauty. I'll never forget the first time I pulled up to Paul's house. He had invited all 50 or so conference attendees over for the evening. I parked my car and started walking up the driveway. Then out came Paul, warmly greeting me. It was a surreal moment. Here I was, shaking hands with a man I'd only ever communicated with through voice messages, a hugely successful businessman. It was one of the first moments I found myself asking, how did I get here? I was reminded of the story in the Bible where Joseph went from being in prison to becoming second in command of all of Egypt. How did that happen? I stood there in awe of Paul's landscaping. The grass was a lush green, almost like a soft carpet. Beautiful plants grew everywhere, and the view stretched out over what I assumed was a distant bay. The house itself was magnificent, with gorgeous architectural lines that fit perfectly into its surroundings. Inside, the house was immaculate, warm, and welcoming. Soon, I met Paul's wife, and she welcomed me like I was a member of the family. People were talking all around me, and I started recognizing faces from videos I had seen. That night, we enjoyed an incredible meal that Paul's wife had prepared. Toward the end of the evening, Paul introduced a man named Norman Bodek. Norman was an older gentleman, and it didn't take long to see that he was a gentle soul with an incredible mind for lean. I soon learned that Norman was essentially the godfather of lean in the United States. Back in the 1970s and 80s, he had traveled to Japan to study lean, and many of the first lean books published in the U.S. were written by Norman. I couldn't believe I was sitting outside on a beautifully landscaped lawn, listening to Norman Bodek talk about lean. It was an unforgettable night. The next day we toured FastCap, and I was absolutely blown away by all the improvements. Everywhere I looked, someone had improved something. Even the bathrooms were spotless, so clean you could probably eat off the toilets. Later that day, attendees began giving their presentations, including me. I can't imagine I gave a great presentation, but I had a fantastic time sharing how I started using lean in farming. Everyone was encouraging, and the atmosphere was collaborative and uplifting. To finish off the summit, we went on a hike in the Cascade Mountains the next day. It took about an hour to get to the trailhead, and the hike itself was stunning. Wild blueberries grew along the path, and we plucked them off the bushes to eat as we walked. At one point, we hiked alongside patches of snow that would never completely melt before the next snowfall. When we reached the top, the view was breathtaking. We could see over into Canada, and the horizon stretched endlessly. It was one of the best hikes I've ever been on. Along the way, I made friends with people I'm still close to today. I also had people start saying, "Hey, you're the lean farmer guy, aren't you?" The name Lean Farmer stuck, and that's how I started introducing myself in my YouTube videos. When we got back down from the hike, I ended up riding in Paul's vehicle. There were great conversations, and I enjoyed every moment. That's when I got my first glimpse of Paul's work ethic. At one point, Paul turned to us and said, "I need someone to drive." He pulled over, climbed into the passenger seat, and within seconds, he was fast asleep, stone cold, dead asleep. 15 minutes later, he woke up just as suddenly as he had gone to sleep. As soon as he opened his eyes, he started working, responding to emails on his phone, while carrying on conversations with everyone in the vehicle. Paul worked harder than I could have imagined. That trip was amazing, and I was so thankful to be there. But at the time, I had no idea what was coming next. Chapter 9, Lean Maniacs. A few weeks passed, and Paul and I continued messaging back and forth. One day, he told me he was planning a trip to Japan. Norman Bodek was well known for taking groups of people to Japan, but recently he hadn't been able to get a good group together. Paul had committed to organizing a group if Norman would host it. Paul had been to Japan before, but this time Norman would be going with us, teaching along the way, and introducing us to his many contacts and friends. It was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime trip. To my surprise, Paul asked me if I wanted to go. I couldn't believe it. As I heard the request play over my phone, a million thoughts flashed through my mind, most of them about why it was impossible. There was no way I had the funds to pay for a trip halfway around the world. On top of that, I had never done much traveling. Other than a short trip to the Bahamas, I'd never been outside the United States. I desperately wanted to go, but before replying to Paul, I went to my bedroom, knelt down, and prayed. I asked God if I should go. That might sound strange to some folks, but I often do that when I face big decisions. In my heart, I clearly heard him say, "I'm taking you to Japan." I got up, went into the other room, and messaged Paul. I told him I didn't know how I would get there, but I would be going. At work, I explained the incredible opportunity I'd been given to study lean in Japan, learning directly from some of the greats who had helped shape the Toyota production system. I had to fill out countless forms and get a pile of signatures all the way up to the executive level of the company. International travel was not something people in my position typically did, but somehow everyone signed off on me going. In March of 2016, I flew to Detroit, where I briefly connected with one of the group members going on the Japan study mission. After a 14-hour flight, we landed in Nagoya, Japan. We made our way through customs, boarded a train, and finally reached our hotel. By the time I got there, I had been traveling for about 25 hours. I was exhausted, but I stood staring out my hotel window, looking at the landscape of Japan's fourth largest city. I'm not much of a city guy. I'm from the middle of nowhere, but the city looked beautiful. As the sun set over Nagoya, I had another one of those surreal moments. How in the world did I get here? Little did I know I'd have that same thought many times throughout the week. Everything about Japan captivated me. The pride they took in their work, the way bikes were left unlocked, and even the way they scrambled their eggs. Everything was intentional and deliberate. The people in our group were just as impressive. There were business leaders from all over the world, running top-class companies, best-selling authors, entrepreneurs, and professionals from every line of work. Our days began early, breakfast, boarding the bus, and heading out by 7:30 a.m. We visited tiered suppliers of Toyota, and too many companies to count. Many days didn't end until 6 or 7 p.m., when we'd finally go to dinner. By bedtime, I was exhausted, but could only sleep a couple of hours before waking up again because of the time difference. Still, the learning was like drinking water from a fire hose. I met some of the most amazing people. Ashley Bailey from the UK was my bus buddy. Since we were traveling in a large group, we were paired up to make sure no one got left behind. Ashley was a brilliant IT professional, ran a successful business, and had one of the best personalities. At the end of the trip, we spent a few hours walking the streets of Tokyo together. Since then, we've tried to meet up a few times, me in the UK, him in the US, but it hasn't worked out. I still follow his company's growth and love seeing what he's accomplishing. I also met Brad Cairns from Canada, one of the most fast-paced people I've ever known. From the moment we met, we hit it off. Brad soaked up knowledge like a sponge, and we spent the whole trip talking about what we were seeing and learning. If I had to describe Brad in one word, it would be fearless. Whether it was tackling a new task or seizing a new business opportunity, Brad approached everything with relentless energy. Little did I know, Brad and I would go on many more adventures together, but that's a story for another chapter. Then there was Felipe Marquez. I had seen him present at the Lean Summit, but hadn't connected with him there. In Japan, we spent a lot of time together, and he quickly became one of my all-time favorite people. Felipe is one of the most caring, articulate, and talented people I've ever met. He constantly works to improve himself, and I admire his thoughtful approach to life. One night, a group of us went to a steakhouse. I don't remember the exact cut of steak, but there was an 8-ounce steak on the menu for $200. Felipe bought the steak, cut it into small pieces, and shared it with all of us. I couldn't fathom spending that kind of money on a meal, but Felipe's generosity stuck with me. I also met David Long, a brilliant businessman from North Carolina. Being from the South, we naturally hit it off. David was almost old enough to be my dad, but we became great friends, What amazed me most about him was his willingness to share everything he knew. I didn't realize it at the time, but he would later introduce me to one of my heroes. Looking back, I didn't quite understand it at the time, but this was my first glimpse into what it's like to hang out with a bunch of lean maniacs. Chapter 10, Lessons from Japan. The people on the trip were amazing, but the training was even better. Every day as we traveled from one company to the next, we were being trained by Norman Bodick, Ritsuo Shingo, or Masamoto Amazawa. No minute was wasted. Norman would tell stories of what he had learned from different companies and leaders in Japan. I can still picture him standing at the front of the bus as we sped down the highway. He wore a light blue sweater with a scarf, holding onto a railing with one hand and a microphone with the other. His gentle voice, often punctuated by his small laugh, filled the bus as he explained deep principles of lean. Norman had more connections in Japan than you could imagine, especially for an American. One company Norman took us to talked about how they had 8 defects out of 30 million parts. Each time we visited one of these companies, I left in complete awe. At another company, we saw a massive punch press using a tool the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. They changed that tool out every 7 minutes, and it only took them 3 minutes to complete the change. In the US, something like that would take days. When we left that plant, I watched business leaders, people who ran large companies, walk outside, sit on the curb, and stare off into the distance, stunned at what they had just seen. Japan understands manufacturing like no other place in the world. At another company, the facility was spotless. When we entered, we all put on white lab coats. After a brief introduction, they took us to the production floor. The building itself was fascinating. We came in on the second story, but we needed to go down to the first. As we approached the escalator, the guide explained something that blew us away. When they designed the building, they originally planned to install an elevator. Then they realized that an elevator would encourage batching and overproduction, something Lean seeks to eliminate. Toyota is all about single-piece flow, which prevents overproduction, the mother of all waste. So instead of an elevator, they installed an escalator. We were all amazed as we rode the escalator down to the production floor. At another tiered supplier, we toured the production floor before heading to their factory support area. We entered a large room where the only sound was the clacking of keyboards. There must have been 30 desks in the room, arranged side by side, facing each other in rows. There were no cubicle walls. Everyone sat ramrod straight, wearing crisp, clean white uniforms. At the front of the room sat a single desk with a man in the same uniform. He stared intently over the entire room, clearly the manager. In front of him was a table. The guide explained that if there was ever an issue on the shop floor, an alarm would sound. The affected team members would immediately gather at the table in front of the manager, quickly resolve the issue, and get back to production. The entire scene looked like something out of a movie. After days of traveling, we arrived in Kyushu, Japan, home to the Lexus manufacturing plant. Mr. Amazawa, who had been a president of Toyota, accompanied us on this part of the trip. He had originally established the Kyushu plant, and it was only through his connections that we were able to gain access. We were the second group of foreigners ever allowed inside the plant. The first group had been from South Korea. As we drove to the plant, Mr. Amazawa explained that when they designed the facility, they set standards for cleanliness equivalent to a hospital and focused on making the plant extremely quiet. They wanted workers to use all their senses when assembling cars. We toured the assembly line in golf carts, and the experience was surreal. The line was so quiet you could barely hear a thing. They had taken extraordinary measures to ensure every part of the line produced as little noise as possible. The plant was also immaculate, just as they had intended. The highlight for me was the paint line. They could paint an entire car in about a minute and switch colors, with less than a minute of setup time. If you've ever painted cars, you know how impossible that sounds. But I stood there watching it happen through a glass window. It was mind-blowing. After the Kyushu tour, we stopped at a restaurant for lunch. I have celiac disease, which means I can't ingest any wheat without getting very sick. At most of the restaurants, they had to prepare special meals for me. That day, as I waited for my meal, Mr. Amazawa personally brought it to me. He had made sure it was exactly what I needed. Here I was, a guy from a small town in Amherst County, Virginia, being served lunch by a former president of Toyota. Once again, I thought to myself, how in the world did I get here? Another highlight of the trip was learning from Ritsuo Shingo, the son of Shigeo Shingo, one of the key developers of the Toyota production system. Ritsuo himself had risen through the ranks of Toyota and become a senior executive. On the bus rides, Ritsuo would teach us about lean principles. He was brilliant yet reserved, with a smile that was infectious. During one ride, Paul Akers asked Ritsuo, "What is lean?" Ritsuo paused, then explained simply, "Lean is seeing waste and making small improvements all the time." Someone filmed that moment, and I didn't know it at the time, but it would become a popular video. Ritsuo was one of my favorite people to learn from, and I had the privilege of being around him several more times before he passed away. The unsung hero of the trip was Mami-san, as we called her. She organized the entire trip, kept us on schedule, and ensured we didn't accidentally insult anyone. Japan has cultural cues that aren't always obvious to outsiders, and Mami-san was amazing at helping us navigate them. She even translated for us at times. Full of energy, she had a beautiful laugh and a bubbly personality that everyone loved. On the last day, as I waited at the Tokyo airport, I noticed something shocking for Japan. A public trash can. The entire time I'd been in the country, I hadn't seen a single trash can in public. The Japanese take waste so seriously that they don't leave it for someone else to clean up. When I finally found the trash can, it was under CCTV surveillance, which made me laugh. As the trip ended, I reflected on what I had learned and the friendships I had made. What struck me most was the generosity of the people on the trip. They weren't takers, they were givers, willing to share knowledge and help others improve. This trip was incredible on so many levels, but it left me asking one question. What is a lean maniac? Chapter 11. What is a lean maniac? A lean maniac is a person who continuously looks for ways to improve every aspect of their life by striving to see waste and eliminate it through small daily improvements. This mindset extends to their personal life, family life, business or profession, and their physical, mental, and spiritual health. Lean maniacs make no excuses for waste. They refuse to accept waste as necessary and will not tolerate poor quality. They are people of action, constantly learning, questioning, and asking why. They strive to banish sloppiness and long for precision and simplicity. They don't chase technology for technology's sake, but instead value simple, effective solutions. They prioritize their customers, share their knowledge freely, and work relentlessly toward perfection. A lean maniac is humble, patient, and kind. They endure challenges with long-suffering determination and aim to lead by serving everyone they come into contact with. I'm sure there could be some debate around the details of what I've stated above, but in short, that is what it means to be a lean maniac. Chapter 12, Your Most Precious Gift. Paul had recently published another book called Lean Health. In it, he applied lean principles to his health. I read the book as eagerly as I had read 2 Second Lean. I understood the concepts, but while I was in Japan, I saw them firsthand in everything Paul did and how he treated his body. In the book, Paul emphasizes that your body is your most precious gift. Without your health, you can never fully be what God intended you to be or fulfill your true purpose in life. That resonated deeply with me, but what really hit home was how he explained our treatment of our bodies. He compared the body to a Lamborghini, a precision vehicle with incredible capabilities. While I've never been a European car guy, I could relate it to a 69 Z28 Rally Sport Camaro. Paul described how no one would mistreat their dream car. You wouldn't slam the doors, spill food in it, or, worse yet, take a sledgehammer to it. Yet every day that's exactly what most people do to their bodies. You only need to glance at health statistics in the United States to see the truth of that statement. As of 2023, the obesity rate in the US was 46%. Over 37 million Americans have diabetes. Roughly 1 in 10 and 1 in 5 don't even know they have it. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the US, with someone having a heart attack every 40 seconds, totaling over 800,000 per year. Half of Americans use at least one prescription drug, and 25% use 3 or more. Recent studies show 70% of US adults report taking medication daily. No matter which statistic you focus on, it's staggering. I consider myself blessed to have celiac disease. That may seem strange to say, but in September of 2007, I discovered that eating anything with wheat or gluten made me very sick. It forced me to change my diet and stop eating many of the carbohydrates most people love. Without that change, I probably would have developed diabetes by now. However, my diet still wasn't great. I replaced wheat with processed foods and sugar, which were just as harmful. While in Japan, most of the food we ate consisted of vegetables and chicken. I also started eating fruit, including an apple larger than a softball. It was the most delicious apple I'd ever tasted. Japan has banned many of the foods Americans eat daily, and that difference stuck with me. I thought a lot about my diet during the trip, and I distinctly remember talking to Paul about it. At the time, I was very thin, weighing only about 116 pounds. I asked him how I could gain weight, and he told me not to worry about gaining weight. Just focus on eating good, healthy food. When I got home, Jenny and I started talking. She had already been considering cutting out sugar and moving toward eating clean food. Once she mentioned it, I decided to follow her lead. We eliminated cane sugar from our diet and anything that converted to sugar in the body. It was challenging at first, but after just 3 days, Jenny and I couldn't stop talking about how much better we felt. Most Americans have no idea how much sugar they consume each year. Consider this example. Drink 32 ounces of soda daily. Eat a sugar-laden bowl of cereal daily. Drink 1 Frappuccino per week. Have 1 glass of wine per week. Eat 1 processed snack per day. This adds up to approximately 51,000 grams of sugar annually, or 113 pounds. That's what many people unknowingly do to their most precious gift, their body. Slowly, Jenny and I kept improving our diets. I started eating fruits and vegetables, including spinach and broccoli, foods I had never touched before. Vegetables became a primary part of our meals, and it completely transformed our lives. If you had known me a year or 2 before, and then met me after Japan, you would have wondered what had happened to me. Jenny and I had never felt better, and we never looked back. To date, I've gained over 20 pounds, most of it muscle. I look and feel better than ever. While many people my age are starting to slow down, Jenny and I are embracing new challenges. We've taken up rock climbing, go on strenuous mountain hikes, and love being physically fit. Lean isn't just for manufacturing. Lean applies to everything, including how you treat your body. Even now, we continue making small improvements to our health. Dave Ramsey, the famous financial advisor, often says, "Live like no one else today, so you can live like no one else tomorrow." While he applies that to finances, I believe it's just as true for how we treat our bodies. In the months after returning from Japan, I had completely changed how I treated my body, but I had no idea how much more was about to change in my life. Chapter 13, Another Lean Adventure. A few months after getting back from Japan, Brad Cairns sent me a message. That wasn't unusual. We talked frequently, but this message was different. He told me he was planning a trip to visit David Long in Wilmington, North Carolina. Not only that, but Felipe would also be joining him. David wanted them to check out his business and give him any pointers on implementing lean. He offered to put them up in his beach house, so the only expense would be getting there. That already sounded like an incredible trip. But then Brad added, "I'm flying my plane down from Canada. How about I stop by and pick you up on my way?" The only wrinkle in this exciting plan was that it fell on my wedding anniversary. Fortunately, I have an amazing wife, and she encouraged me to go. Before I knew it, I had agreed to another wild, lean adventure. The day arrived, and I drove to our small private airport, parked my car, and waited. Brad's plane landed, and I walked out to greet him. The plane could technically hold 4 people, but practically, it was comfortable for 2. It was white with a red stripe, and as I approached, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. I'd flown on commercial planes plenty of times, but private and small planes were a different story. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, I put my bag in the back of the plane, and Brad taxied us out to the runway. As we lined up for takeoff, Brad casually asked me to grab the yoke. Then the all clear came from the tower, and he told me to adjust the pedals at my feet. "Wait, what?" I said, completely unprepared. The next thing I knew, we were barreling down the runway, and Brad announced, "I'm going to let you fly us to Wilmington." I was equal parts terrified and thrilled, gripping the yoke with white knuckles. Brad walked me through everything I needed to do, and I had an incredible time. The view from the air was breathtaking. I could see thunderstorms off in the distance, dumping rain on the ground below. At one point, we had to navigate carefully between 2 large clouds to avoid getting boxed in by storms. But we made it through. As we approached Wilmington, we were placed in a holding pattern, circling the airport. A rainstorm was moving over the area, and we had to wait for it to pass. Fuel was becoming a concern after nearly 2 hours of flight, and we started considering other airports. Just as we thought we might need to divert, the rain cleared, and we were given the all clear to land. Brad had taken over the controls by this time, and we landed just before the next rain band hit. David picked us up at the airport with Felipe already in tow and treated us like kings. He took us to dinner, just the first of many amazing meals. That night, we stayed at his beachfront home, each of us with a large bedroom to ourselves. The next morning, David cooked us breakfast before taking us to his business. His company made the Employee of the Month plaques you see in large chain stores. We spent the day observing his production area and offering suggestions for improvement. David also invited us to sit in on his company's book club, which was a brilliant concept I've since implemented in every leadership position I've held. Each month, all employees were given a book to read, typically 1 chapter per week. The entire company would then gather to discuss what they learned. It was an excellent way to foster collaboration and ensure continuous learning. That afternoon, we participated in a mastermind meeting where business leaders from a diverse range of industries gathered at David's company to share challenges and offer solutions. The atmosphere was incredible, a testament to the power of collaboration and shared knowledge. Brad, Felipe, and I had a fantastic time learning from David and talking about lean. The next morning, we said goodbye to Felipe, who planned to spend the rest of the day with David before visiting us at the farm. The following day, Brad and I returned to the airport and took off for Virginia. The flight back was much like the trip down, though Brad and I had some deep conversations about the theory of constraints. At the time, I thought I understood the concept, but our discussion made me question whether I truly grasped it. Little did I know, this conversation would plant the seeds for another remarkable encounter, all stemming from my meeting Brad in Japan. At some point during the flight, I had the same recurring thought: how in the world did I get here? Here I was, flying in a private plane with a guy from Canada, whom I'd met in Japan, after spending a few days with someone from Portugal, all while visiting the business of a best-selling author in North Carolina. When Brad dropped me off at the airport, he said, "I'm coming to your farm when Felipe visits." I laughed and said, "That would be awesome, Brad, but you're flying back to Canada tonight and Felipe doesn't get here until tomorrow." Brad grinned and replied, I know, but tomorrow I'm driving back into the United States with a flatbed truck to pick up some equipment for my business. I'll just swing by and see you. I welcomed him, though I left the airport convinced it wouldn't happen. From my house to Brad's home in Canada was a 10 to 12-hour drive. Logistically, it seemed impossible. Little did I know what was about to unfold on the farm. Chapter 14. Farmyard Improvements. When Felipe arrived at the farm, we had an absolute blast. I took him on a tour with the four-wheeler, showing him the chickens, cows, hogs, and horses. We spent some time shooting shotguns and pistols, but one of my favorite memories from his visit was when he helped me castrate a piglet. If you're not familiar with the process, castration involves performing a small surgical procedure to remove the piglet's testicles. This requires making 1 or 2 incisions and then removing the testicles. As you can imagine, the piglet isn't exactly thrilled about this. When I first started, the process was complicated, required 3 people, and took me 1 to 2 minutes per piglet. Felipe, being the good sport he is, experienced his first piglet castration that day. His job was to hold down the piglet's front half while my son held the back legs, and I performed the surgery. The person holding the rear legs has the higher risk of injury. One wrong jerk or lunge by the piglet during the incision, and the holder could get cut. At some point during the procedure, I got sprayed in the face. To this day, I'm not entirely sure what hit me, but when you've been farming long enough, those things become normal. I didn't miss a beat and finish the surgery, but Felipe got quite the laugh out of it. Even now, I think it's hilarious. Over time, I kept improving the process. I started wearing earmuffs, which helped me concentrate and finish faster, since piglets can be unbelievably loud. There are even reports of hog farmers going deaf from prolonged exposure to the noise. Eventually, I built a stand that allowed me to secure the piglet by hanging it over a small bar, with its head facing down and its back feet under another bar. This innovation eliminated the need for additional people, placed the surgical area at the perfect height, and made the entire process safer and faster. Most remarkably, the piglets rarely screamed in this setup. I could finish the entire procedure in just 30 seconds. This improvement hit all 4 factors of a worthwhile lean improvement. Safety. The piglet was secure and no one was at risk of injury from thrashing or accidental cuts. Quality. The lack of movement allowed for precise incisions and better overall results. Simplicity. The process went from needing 3 people to just 1. I also included Kaizen foam on the stand to organize my scalpel, alcohol, and blue coat. Speed. The process was dramatically faster, taking only 30 seconds from start to finish. Later that day, I heard a rumble coming up the driveway and was shocked to see a large flatbed truck with a massive machine on the back. Brad was driving, and somehow he had made it to the farm. That's what I love about Brad. He just gets things done. He brought his fiancée, Ashley, and we had an amazing time. We rode my ex-racehorse Chevy, enjoyed lunch, and then got down to serious lean discussions. This is where the value of having others observe your work becomes clear. The second lean community thrives on collaboration, and the insights they provide are invaluable. Brad, Ashley, and Felipe watched me feed the hogs. My process involved walking to the grain shed, filling a 5-gallon bucket, carrying it 250 yards to the hog pen, tossing the feed, and then walking the bucket back to the shed. I'd been doing it this way for so long, I never questioned it. They asked a simple question: why don't you keep the feed near the hogs? It was such an obvious solution, but I had overlooked it. My process was full of wasted motion and transportation. After a week of mulling it over, I reorganized a building near the hog pen and moved the feed there. It was one of the best improvements I've ever made on the farm, and I owe it to their fresh perspective. The day ended with Felipe playing the guitar. He had incredible talent, and Brad and Ashley teaching us how to swing dance. As Brad and Ashley drove their truck back to Canada, and Felipe headed to a hotel before his flight to Portugal, I couldn't help but marvel, how did I get here? Someone had flown from Portugal to see our farm, and 2 others had driven from Canada just to talk lean and spend the day with us. It was an amazing experience, and the best part was, it would only get better. Chapter 15, The World's Most Famous Farmer. Part of the reason Jenny and I got into farming was that we wanted our family to eat differently. We also wanted to farm differently. We didn't want processes that required pumping our animals full of antibiotics to stay healthy. We wanted our animals living on good, clean soil with no pesticides. We wanted them to experience the world as their creator intended. We envisioned chickens scratching in the dirt and chasing bugs, cows grazing on a lush green salad of grasses and plants, and hogs rooting, digging, and lounging in the mud. We wanted to treat our animals with respect. When we first started farming, we didn't know anything. We weren't raised on farms, so we had to learn everything through reading, YouTube, or asking other farmers. One of the farmers I read extensively about was Joel Salatin. Joel runs Polyface Farm in Swope, Virginia. It's a large farm with hundreds, if not thousands, of animals. But Joel farms in the way we aspired to, working with his animals and nature to produce the highest quality food. Joel has published multiple books, appeared on countless podcasts, been featured in Oscar-winning documentaries, and was spotlighted in Time magazine. He's met with Charles, the Prince of Wales, now King of England, and most recently accepted a key cabinet position within the Trump administration. Thousands of people travel from all over the world each year to visit his farm. Joel is a rock star in the world of permaculture and natural farming, earning him the title of the world's most famous farmer. Jenny and I had visited Polyface Farm a couple of times, but had never met Joel Salatin in person. He was always off speaking at events or busy with other commitments. A month or 2 after Brad and Felipe's visit, David Long reached out to let me know he was going to be in the area. A good friend of his, who happened to be college roommates with Joel Salatin, was visiting Joel. David was coming along and had arranged for all of them to go out to dinner, and he wanted me to join. I was ecstatic. I was going to have dinner with the world's most famous farmer. A few weeks later, Jenny and I drove 1.5 hours to Staunton to meet David, his wife, his friend and his wife, and Joel and his wife. We dined at a beautiful restaurant in the old city of Staunton, one that served local farm products, including beef from Joel Salatin's farm. I had a great time listening to their conversations and hearing Joel talk. He was exactly as he came across in podcasts, books, and videos. At some point during the evening, I had a surreal moment of reflection. How did I get here? I was having dinner with Joel Salatin in a restaurant serving his beef, eating a steak from one of his cows. It all started with 2 seconds and making small improvements in myself. When the night ended, we all went our separate ways, but I've always been grateful to David for arranging that unforgettable evening. Chapter 16, From Pigpen to the Stage. I continued making improvements on the farm, in my personal life, and at my day job. Slowly but surely, things kept improving. One of my favorite improvements during that time involved a small piglet named Agnes. A few weeks after Agnes was born, we noticed a lump under her belly near her back legs. We kept an eye on it, but it continued to grow. After speaking with other farmers, we learned she had a hernia, and if left untreated, it would only worsen. When humans have a hernia, they undergo surgery and recover relatively quickly. The same could work for livestock, but where we lived, there weren't many large animal vets who performed that type of operation. Most vets focused on horses or cows. We would have had to travel several hours to find someone, and the procedure would have cost more than we could afford. Every farmer we consulted, both in person and on social media, told us to put Agnes down. It broke our hearts to consider euthanizing an otherwise perfectly healthy piglet. Then, one farmer suggested an outrageous idea, but we were desperate and willing to try it. A large part of lean is curiosity, experimentation, and being open to unconventional solutions. The farmer recommended using a bottle cap to heal the hernia. The idea sounded absolutely crazy, but we gave it a shot. I caught Agnes, gently pushed the hernia back inside her belly, placed a milk cap over the area, and then Jenny wrapped duct tape around the piglet's body to hold the cap in place. When we set Agnes down, she walked on two legs with her back end up in the air for a moment, clearly annoyed by the duct tape, but we left it in place. A few days later, we found Agnes had wiggled out of the duct tape. To our surprise, the hernia was gone. Piglets grow incredibly fast, and during those few days, her muscles had grown and filled in the area where the hernia had been. The milk cap and duct tape had done their job, holding everything in place long enough for her body to heal naturally. It was an unconventional improvement that worked because we were willing to experiment and stay curious. A mindset that's critical for anyone serious about continuous improvement. As I continued improving processes on the farm, I also kept making videos and small improvements at work. At first, the progress seemed slow, but over time, it snowballed. Eventually, it became second nature, a way of thinking and operating. During this period, I was invited to be a guest on Gemba Academy, an industry leader in lean education and training. I had a fantastic time being interviewed and discussing how I applied lean principles to farming. Shortly afterward, I was invited to speak at a lean conference in Maryland. I prepared my presentation and traveled to the event. Although I wasn't the keynote speaker, I presented during a breakout session and had an amazing time sharing my story. The keynote speaker at the conference was Bruce Hamilton, famously known as the Old Lean Dude. Bruce is a highly respected figure in the lean community, known for his educational videos, conference talks, and blogs. Meeting him felt surreal, I'd watched so many of his videos, and now I was speaking at the same conference. I had another one of those moments where I thought, how did I get here? Just a couple of years ago, I had realized how little I truly knew about lean, and now I was presenting alongside industry leaders. But the journey was far from over. Things just kept getting better. Chapter 17. Jenny and the Kitchen. My wife Jenny is a natural at farming. She's amazing with animals, fearless when it comes to working outside around large livestock, and an incredible worker. She has wrestled newborn calves out of creeks during torrential rain, helped me corral large boars back into their pens after an escape, and even assisted with processing chickens. When it comes to baby animals, she has a gift for keeping them alive. Once, when our neighbor's goats had kids, some were struggling to survive. Overwhelmed by over 100 goats, he asked if we could take a few of the weaker ones. We said yes, but when he brought them over, they looked lifeless. One goat was so limp that when you picked it up, its nose drooped back and touched its hind legs. Somehow, Jenny managed to nurse that goat back to life. She's far better at farming than I am. After I began taking a different approach to lean, focusing solely on improving myself, I noticed Jenny and the kids started to embrace lean as well. Jenny, in particular, became a powerhouse of improvements. When I'd leave on business trips, I'd often return to find she had completely redesigned a process for the better. She naturally saw waste and worked to eliminate it. Waste of motion and transportation are especially significant in farming, and Jenny had an intuitive knack for spotting inefficiencies and creating solutions. Her improvements didn't stop at the farm. At home, we committed to eating clean, wholesome food. For the most part, we didn't eat anything that came out of a wrapper or plastic packaging. Jenny cooked all of our meals and baked everything we ate, navigating a host of food allergies in the process. She became a master chef, preparing delicious meals without gluten, dairy, corn, or sugar. For baking, she primarily used almond flour and managed to create incredible waffles, cakes, pies, and other treats, all without sugar or anything that converts to it. Since she spent so much time in the kitchen, we knew we needed an upgrade. When we bought the farm, the kitchen was in dire need of renovation, so when the time came to redo it, Jenny applied lean principles to the design. She envisioned the kitchen as a work cell, optimized for food preparation. At the main counter, the top cabinet holds all her baking supplies. To her left, a spice rack drawer contains every spice she regularly uses. Directly in front of her, the bottom cabinet houses all her pots, pans, and cooking tools. Behind her is the island, providing additional workspace. The island includes a pull-out trash can, perfectly placed for easy disposal during cooking or baking. To her right is the gas stove, chosen not only for its precision, but also for its speed in heating. Jenny developed the design herself, and when we installed the new cabinets, we followed her layout. It works brilliantly and has saved countless hours in the kitchen. Lean can be applied to anything, whether it's nursing a baby goat back to life or streamlining dinner preparation. There's always waste involved, and with small improvements, you can make life better every day. Chapter 18, The Mother of All Waste. Overproduction is known as the mother of all waste. Once you overproduce, you're almost guaranteed to deal with the remaining 7 wastes. Businesses love to overproduce for all kinds of reasons, and many times it's to hide how bad their processes really are. Having a ton of inventory allows processes to be sloppy without significantly affecting downstream operations. Overproduction often takes the form of batching. People love batching so much that we don't even realize we're doing it. We bake batches of cookies, do loads of laundry, pay the bills all at once, and the list goes on. Outside the home, batching shows up everywhere. We batch when we're stopped at a traffic light, crammed into elevators, or seated on airplanes. Once you batch, you inevitably encounter the other wastes that follow overproduction. Farmers especially seem to struggle with admitting that many of our processes involve overproduction or batching. It took me a while to see it in my own processes, but once I did, I couldn't unsee it. I don't have all the answers for eliminating overproduction, but recognizing it is key. A few specific examples helped me start seeing overproduction in farming. One example is my neighbor who kept over 100 goats. Watching them roam the fields in a large group was beautiful. Most people only have a handful of goats, but his herd was impressive. Every year, he'd let his billy goat mate with all the does, and soon after all the does would drop kids at roughly the same time. When the kids were born, it was nearly impossible for him to keep up. If a mother had multiples and one was struggling, there wasn't much he could do because there were too many kids needing attention. This created a lot of waste, from defects, sick or weak kids, to excess processing and motion as he tried to manage the situation. It was a challenging time for him. I did something similar with hogs. I had 3 sows and 1 boar, and I left the boar with the sows all the time without considering what that would mean. 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days later, all 3 sows dropped piglets at once. 30 piglets in 24 hours. When a piglet is first born, it can't maintain its body temperature. As long as it's above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, it's not an issue, but at that time it was much colder. We had to keep a close eye on the piglets, and even brought some into the house to warm them up. Then, as they grew to processing weight, I had to figure out what to do with 30 pigs all at the same time. That batch caused problems for months. Another example is the haying process. Every year, farmers let grass grow into hay, then cut it all at once. After it's cut, it sits in the field to dry for a few days, gets turned a couple of times, and is finally baled, mostly into round bales. Each bale itself is a batch because a single cow can't eat it all at once. Then comes the waste of transporting those bales. Tractors move them across the field, load them onto trailers, and haul them to storage, where they are unloaded again. often to sit outside in the open. Later, the bales are transported back to the field to feed the cows. The entire process is full of waste: motion, transportation, excess processing, and waiting. From a big picture perspective, you grow grass, cut it, store it, and then haul it back to where the cows eat it. I don't have a better solution for haying, but it's important to learn to see the waste. Can you see the waste in your processes? Chapter 19, The Fun Side of Lean. As I continue on my lean journey, I'm amazed at the people I've had the opportunity to meet. Around this time, I stumbled across a YouTube video by Sean Miller. In the video, he said he was trying to learn more about lean, and he was looking for a mentor. He wondered if anyone would be willing to help him. By random chance, I happened to see that video. I replied and said, "I'm not sure about being a mentor, but I love lean, and if you want to talk, we can do that." We connected via Voxer and started messaging back and forth. Voxer was great because we both had different schedules, but it allowed us to keep in touch. Sean's family owned a business in Ohio that made cardboard partitions. What made it special was their mission. They focused on giving people who had previously been in trouble with the law a second chance by letting them work there. I thought that was incredible. Sean and I kept exchanging messages, talking about his business, lean, and so much more. Sean is an amazing leader, extremely talented, creative, and dedicated. When he sets his mind to something, he makes it happen. Over time, we grew to be great friends. Eventually, he was able to swing by the farm for a quick tour. Over the years, we also traveled to the same conferences in places all over the world. During this time, Sean kept making steady progress at the company he was now running. They started having morning meetings, making small improvements, and focusing on developing their people. A few years later, I happened to be driving through Ohio and was able to stop by the factory. I was so excited to finally see the building, processes, machines, and people I had heard so much about. It was incredible to see everything in person, learn about the small improvements they'd made, and hear about their future plans. What impressed me most was how bold Sean was. I'm not sure I could have made some of the business decisions he had. One of my favorite improvements was also one of the most fun. Outside the factory, there's a small body of water where waterfowl like to land, which caused problems for the facility. Instead of running outside to spook the birds away, Sean had a blast coming up with a creative solution. He bought a large remote-controlled truck. Whenever the birds were where they weren't supposed to be, Sean would pull out the truck, turn it on, and drive it down to the pond to chase the birds off. It was effective, clever, and fun. A perfect example of lean in action. If lean isn't fun, you're not doing it right. If you make lean all about charts, graphs, and tools, no one is going to be interested. Lean should be about people fixing what bugs them, using their creativity, and having fun in the process. Most companies make it about programs or initiatives, but all of that is waste. Let people solve their own problems and enjoy the solutions they come up with. Chapter 20, The Heart of Cambridge. As time progressed, I continued making improvements at my day job, on the farm, with my health, and with my family. My life kept improving and getting better in every way. In September of 2017, the Second Lean Conference was held in St. Louis, Missouri, at a company called Cambridge Engineering. The people who ran that company had gone to Japan with us, and they were amazing. From talking to them in Japan, I could tell they truly loved their people and were passionate about making great quality products. They hosted the conference, which drew several hundred attendees. The event featured multiple presentations and several panel discussions. To my surprise, I was asked to participate in one of the panels, and it absolutely blew me away. I had another one of those moments where I thought, how did I get here? There I was, on stage in front of hundreds of people, sitting beside Paul Akers, talking about the power of making videos. How did I go from never really making videos to having a YouTube channel to being on stage with Paul Akers, sharing insights about videos. It was surreal. The panel addressed various questions about video creation, and we all took turns responding. Sharing the stage with industry experts and contributors I admired was both humbling and exhilarating. The conference also featured some excellent speakers, but the highlight for me was the factory tour. Cambridge Engineering manufactured large air handling equipment, and they had truly empowered their people. Every morning they held a morning meeting, followed by time dedicated to making improvements. Some of their employees had made dozens of small but impactful changes that were truly inspiring. Meals were provided for the large group of attendees, creating a great opportunity to connect with like-minded people. During one meal, I sat with an Amish family that had traveled several hundred miles to participate in the conference. They had read 2 Second Lean and implemented its principles in their woodworking shop. One of my favorite aspects of the 2 Second Lean community is its diversity. It includes real estate moguls, manufacturing plant owners from India, ladder manufacturers, and so much more. Despite their different industries, they share common traits. They're driven to improve, and they're all givers. Every single person I've met in this community is willing to help others without expecting anything in return. 5 years later, I had the opportunity to return to Cambridge, this time bringing my own team of leaders and managers. Once again, I was blown away by their hospitality, the improvements they had made, and the company's growth. Being around people in the 2 Second Lean community is always inspiring. The night before my second visit, the CEO and CFO of Cambridge took my entire team out to dinner and generously paid for the meal. I often find myself surrounded by incredibly successful people and can't help but wonder why they give me the time of day. Yet they do, and they give freely. These experiences with the 2 Second Lean community have continually reminded me of the power of generosity and the joy of shared growth. My lean adventures, however, were far from over. Chapter 21, Lean US Tour. In late 2018, I was promoted to an operations management position within a large company. Getting into management had always been a goal of mine, but breaking through had taken years of effort and self-improvement. Finally, I had earned the opportunity. Just 2 weeks into the new role, it was time for a lean trip I'd been looking forward to for months. My friend Brad had organized a U.S. lean study tour inspired by the one we had done in Japan. This tour was ambitious. Over 4 days, we planned to visit 5 companies across 3 states. The logistics alone were daunting, but Brad had pulled it off, and I couldn't wait to see what was in store. On Sunday, I boarded a flight to Denver, Colorado, where the tour would begin. That evening, our group of about a dozen participants gathered for dinner. To my surprise, several people recognized me as the lean farmer and were excited to meet me. Seeing familiar faces, like my friend Ashley from the UK, made it feel like a reunion. The first day, we visited Xylem Design, a smaller company run by Greg Gleep. Greg was a craftsman who had become a successful business leader, and his philosophical approach to lean was inspiring. He had a way of looking at lean that made you think about its deeper principles, and I learned a lot just by listening to him. His factory tour was impressive, and the day set a high bar for the rest of the trip. After lunch, we dove into the theory of constraints. The session was led by Harold Cavallaro, a dynamic and brilliant speaker. At the time, I thought I understood TOC, but Harold quickly showed me otherwise. The training was typically a 2-day class, but Harold condensed it into 3 hours, delivering an intense and high-level overview. His energy was contagious, and his expertise was undeniable. By the end of the session, I realized how much I had to learn, and how TOC could completely change the way I approached manufacturing. The next day, we flew to Salt Lake City, Utah. It was my first time in the state, and the desert scenery was breathtaking. We visited a company where we were introduced to Throughput Accounting, a concept that was new to me and fascinating to learn about. Later, we toured a cabinet door manufacturer that had perfected its lean practices. They operated with minimal inventory and had a unique approach to employee development. Promotions were earned by learning. For every book an employee read or listened to, they moved closer to a promotion. Workers throughout the factory were listening to books as they worked, and the culture of continuous improvement was palpable. The company also celebrated financial milestones in real time. When they reached their break-even point for the day, an announcement was made, and the entire factory cheered. When they hit one X profit, another cheer erupted. It was one of the most engaging and motivating environments I had ever seen. Late that night, we flew to Seattle, Washington. The following morning, we visited Cass Tailored, a company specializing in custom upholstery for the airline industry. Their training methods and employee development practices were innovative, and their commitment to quality was evident in every aspect of their work. That evening, we visited Paul Akers' home for dinner. As always, Paul's house and landscaping were stunning, reflecting his constant pursuit of improvement. We spent the evening sharing stories, discussing lean, and enjoying each other's company. The next morning, we toured FastCap, and I was once again blown away by how much the company had evolved since my last visit. Everywhere I looked, there were countless small improvements. We participated in FastCap's morning meeting, which is like nothing else you'll see anywhere in the world. Every employee takes a turn running the meeting, preparing the presentation, gathering information, and leading the discussion. It's an incredible way to develop people and foster leadership. During the meeting, they reviewed products and even wrote down what they were thankful for, adding it to a large glass box filled with hundreds of notes. The culture was inspiring, and I left FastCap feeling energized and motivated. This trip was unforgettable. It broadened my understanding of lean, deepened my relationships with like-minded individuals, and showed me how much there is still to learn. But as I returned home, I had no idea that life was about to throw me a curveball. One that would test everything I had learned and push me in ways I never expected. Chapter 22, Sloppiness Will Kill You. Returning from the U.S. Lean Tour, I was energized and excited after spending a week immersed in amazing lean companies. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was juggling cutting the grass while trying to do something special for my wife. She had taken care of all the farm chores while I was away, and as always, she had not only handled everything, but also made improvements along the way. I decided to cook dinner for her as a small gesture of appreciation. I jumped on the riding lawnmower to finish cutting the grass, aiming to complete the task quickly. As I passed by a large cherry tree, I suddenly heard a loud metal ping. In the same instant, something slammed into my chest. It felt like a punch from a heavyweight boxer. I turned off the mower, slid out of the seat, and looked down to see a hole in my shirt. Lifting my shirt, I discovered a hole in my chest with blood pouring out. My first instinct was to take a deep breath to confirm I could still breathe. I realized something had punctured me, but whatever it was, hadn't come out the other side. I couldn't immediately identify what had hit me. I walked into the house and told my wife we might need to go to the doctor. When I showed her the hole in my chest, she grabbed a wad of paper towels to help stem the bleeding. I sat down, but the pain was intense, and I was beginning to feel lightheaded. My wife and kids rushed around, helping me get ready to go. When they tried to put flip-flops on me, I insisted on my cowboy boots, figuring that if I was going to die, it would be in my boots. Just kidding, but not really. I'm not fond of doctors, so instead of heading to the emergency room, I asked my wife to take me to a walk-in clinic. She drove faster than I'd ever seen her drive, and within 30 minutes we arrived. I must have been a sight, with blood on my shirt and a wad of paper towels pressed to my chest. A nurse quickly brought me a wheelchair, my first ever ride in one, and whisked me into a room. When the doctor arrived, his calm demeanor immediately put me at ease. After a brief examination, he ordered x-rays. Moving for the x-rays was excruciating, but soon the doctor returned with the results. A piece of wire was lodged in my chest. He prepped me for a minor procedure, numbing the area and making a small incision to widen the hole. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and there were moments when he had to pause to let the bleeding slow. My wife stayed by my side the entire time, even helping to wipe up blood. The doctor struggled to grip the wire with tweezers, the sound of them clinking together grating on my nerves. I jokingly suggested he use needle-nose pliers. To my surprise, he agreed, and after some more digging, he finally pulled out the wire and placed it in a small plastic cup for me to keep. When I got home, exhausted and sore, my dad helped me piece together what had happened. A year or so earlier, I had cut a piece of electric fence wire and carelessly tossed it next to the cherry tree instead of properly disposing of it. Somehow, the mower had picked up the wire, launched it off the front deck, and ricocheted it straight into my chest. Months later, complications led to an ultrasound, revealing that the wire had ricocheted off a rib and nearly penetrated my chest cavity. I was extremely fortunate. It could have killed me. When Paul Akers later wrote his book, Banish Sloppiness, this incident came to mind immediately. My carelessness had nearly cost me my life. While sloppiness might not always result in life-threatening injuries, it can drag you, your work, and your business down. Being crisp, precise, and intentional is crucial. Eliminating sloppiness is a constant effort, and I continue to work on it daily. This lesson was one of the most painful of my life, but I would soon suffer another injury that would significantly impact the farm. Chapter 23, The Weight of Waste. A few months after getting a wire shot into my chest by the lawnmower, I faced another significant injury. This one really slowed me down and had a lasting impact on the farm. At that point, we still didn't have a tractor, which had its downsides. One of our biggest winter challenges was feeding hay. In the past, our neighbor had helped by cutting square bales of hay from our fields. We stored hundreds of these bales to feed the horses, cows, goats, and even the pigs. Handling those bales was backbreaking manual labor. As tough as it was, I actually enjoyed parts of it, but it made for some long, grueling days. Typically, you're baling hay when it's 90 degrees outside. Square bales are great because they're easy to move. I remember a time when snow covered the ground, and I had cows in a back pasture that couldn't be reached by a tractor. I grabbed one of the kids' sleds, placed a square bale on top, and rode the sled down to the cows. You can't do that with a round bale. In exchange for cutting hay on our fields, we agreed to help our neighbor get up square bales for his goats, putting away another couple hundred for him. I preferred square bales because, in my mind, they reduced the batch size. Most farmers thought I was crazy, but I genuinely liked using them. In fact, I would have preferred even smaller square bales. Farmers generally dislike square bales because they require a lot of manual labor. They prefer round bales because tractors can handle them. From my perspective, though, farmers were taking an already too large batch size, an 80-pound square bale, and increasing it to a 600 to 800-pound round bale, essentially overproducing. I have a wild imagination when it comes to hay. Most people probably don't give hay much thought, but the entire process is so full of waste that it drives me crazy. I imagine a world where hay comes in very small bales, weighing 15 to 20 pounds, making them easy to pick up. Their size and weight could be tailored to the type of cow and the amount of hay it consumes in one sitting. Maybe they'd even be small round balls held together by biodegradable cord, something the cows could safely eat. On a cold winter morning, you'd load up a hay cannon and shoot the hay balls around the field for the cows to enjoy. I know that sounds crazy, but if you're going to be a lean maniac, you've got to have a little fun. Who wouldn't want to sit on a machine and shoot hay balls into a field for cows? While that idea may never become reality, It illustrates how hay is an essential part of farming and how the current process involves a ton of waste. One year, our neighbor only baled round bales. In return for letting him cut hay on our fields, he gave us a few. That summer, we managed to move some round bales by hand. It took 3 of us pushing with all our might to roll one into position. In early January, with snow on the way, we needed to move a round bale into the field for the cows. My son Tommy and I headed out to do the job. The bale had gotten even heavier from the rain. Despite pushing as hard as we could, it wouldn't budge. Frustrated and determined, I put my shoulder into it like an offensive lineman trying to break through a defense. I pushed harder than before, but the bale didn't move. And in that moment, I hurt my shoulder. It wasn't until months of severe pain later that I discovered I had partially torn my bicep off the shoulder. In June, I underwent surgery where the surgeon completely severed the bicep, drilled a hole into my arm bone, and sutured the bicep back onto the bone. For weeks, I couldn't even lift a bottle of water. My recovery was slow, with a total of 12 weeks of restrictions, and it took 6 to 9 months before I felt normal again. To me, the injury only confirmed that round bales are wasteful. Beyond the physical toll, the injury forced me to sell some of our animals, and more importantly, made me slow down and think before forcing my way through a problem. That painful experience prepared me for the biggest step in my lean journey yet. Chapter 24, Lean Life. After injuring my shoulder, it became almost impossible to keep up with certain aspects of the farm. I was forced to give up some of the animals I loved. I still vividly remember the day someone came to pick up my last hog, a beautiful red sow. We had run her into a fenced area behind the house where we planted our garden in late spring. A farmer arrived in a pickup truck with a giant cage on the back. I remember thinking, what is this guy thinking? He has no way to get the hog into that cage. It's in the back of his truck. The farmer said he wanted the hog, stepped inside the pen, caught her, wrestled her to the ground, hog-tied her legs, and then, with the help of his 2 sons, picked up the 400-pound sow and slid her into the cage. Once she was safely inside, they untied her legs, and she stood up, free to move. I stood there helpless, my injured arm dangling at my side, watching them do what I couldn't. In that moment, it felt like a piece of me was hog-tied and put out of commission. I was discouraged and frustrated because I couldn't do anything. The cows were gone, the pigs were gone, and I was left sitting still, something I rarely do. I'm always working on something, usually on the farm, and I never considered it work because I loved it. Around this time, Paul was working on his next book, Lean Life. I found the concept particularly interesting since I'd never heard anyone apply lean principles to life itself. As he wrote, he would send me chapters to read, using a kind of single-piece flow. Each time he finished a chapter, he'd send it over for me to review and sometimes comment on. I essentially read the book as he wrote it. That book profoundly impacted me. Out of all the books Paul has written, I still contend that Lean Life is the most important. Looking back, I realize that if I hadn't hurt my bicep, I might never have paid as much attention to the book. But because my shoulder injury had taken me out of commission, I had the time to invest in both the book and the exercises it required. One key lean principle is value-added work, which is typically defined as anything that changes the form, fit, or function of a product. If a process doesn't do that, it's considered waste, and over 90% of all processes are waste. Most people struggle to believe that level of waste exists because they haven't yet learned to see it. Waste is everywhere, even in our lives. In the book, Paul walks readers through identifying waste in their lives, whether it's being distracted by things that don't matter or failing to focus on what truly brings happiness. We were made to create and improve. And if we're not doing those things, we're wasting the precious gift of life. The book forces readers to stop and reflect on what makes them happy. And, More importantly, what doesn't. While people can easily list things that irritate them, that's just complaining. Very few can quickly articulate what genuinely makes them happy. Lean Life walks you through identifying things that don't bring joy, then guides you in figuring out what does make you happy. Paul emphasizes that many people excel in one or two areas out of three crucial ones: health, relationships, and business, or mind, body, and spirit. People may find success in business but neglect their relationships or health. Others may be in great physical shape but fail to nurture their minds or continue learning. The book stresses that true success comes from balancing and improving in all three areas. I specifically remember reflecting on my wife, Jenny, while reading part of the book. She's amazing, a powerhouse on the farm, and an incredible partner in life. She can hold down a pig while I castrate it and then change into a ballet outfit to head into town for an adult class. We've been married for over 25 years, and she's always put me first. We've had a great relationship, one most people would envy, but the book made me realize I could treat her even better. I use the analogy that sometimes I treated her like a Chevy Cavalier when I should have been treating her like a 69 Z28 Rally Sport Camaro, my dream car. That small revelation forever changed my marriage. One of the book's final exercises is creating a what makes you happy document. Everyone's document will be different, but the general framework is the same. First, you list the things that make you unhappy. This requires significant thought and specificity. It's not something you can do in 5 minutes. I invested hours in my document. After listing what makes you unhappy, you outline specific actions to address each item. It's essential to be detailed and measurable so you can track your progress. Next, you list the things that bring you joy. Again, this should take careful thought. Once you have the list, you write down how you'll ensure those things become regular parts of your life. In my document, I also included goals I wanted to achieve, quotes that inspire me, and Bible verses that resonate with me. For several months after creating my document, I listened to it every morning during my commute to work. To give you an idea of its length, it took 20 to 30 minutes to listen to, and that was with the playback speed increased. It's meant to be a living document, something you update as you grow and learn. Periodically, you'll add new goals or remove things that no longer apply. By doing this, you'll be amazed at the progress you make. Goals you once thought were out of reach start becoming reality, relationships improve, and your life steadily gets better. I've provided my What Makes You Happy document as an example in the appendix. I'm sure it's not perfect, could be improved, and may not follow Paul's book exactly, but none of that matters. What matters is starting. If you haven't created your document yet, you need to. I had no idea at the time what this document would do for me next. Chapter 25, Harold Cavallaro. On the farm and in my new operations management position at work, I kept making improvements to myself and, where I could, to the group I was responsible for. Coming out of COVID, I was promoted into a new position. Shortly after that, I was promoted again. I remember thinking, how in the world does this keep happening? God was obviously blessing me, but on my end, it was because I kept following the 2 second lean principles. It was around this time that I recalled the introduction to the theory of constraints training I received during the U.S. Lean Tour. I still had my training manual, and flipping through it, I came across Harold Cavallaro's contact information. I reached out to him, and he remembered me. We started talking, and I arranged for him to teach a class for me. It was during this time that I really got to know Harold. Harold is past retirement age, but you'd never know it by looking at him. He looks like a man in his early 50s and works like someone in their 30s. He's of average height but in superb shape. He's naturally high energy and can get a room excited just by walking into it. Harold is well read and has traveled all over the world. He's been in more manufacturing plants than you could imagine and always had a great story for whatever topic we happened to be discussing. What truly blew me away was learning that he was one of the pioneers of the theory of constraints. Eliyahu, Eli Goldratt, an Israeli physicist, developed what would later be called the theory of constraints, or TOC. I'm not going to dive deep into TOC because that could be its own book. I've read all of Goldratt's books and I love them. TOC has been applied worldwide, and there are countless videos and books written about it. Most people working in process improvement believe they know something about it. In the business world, Goldratt is famous, and some say his book, The Goal, is on Elon Musk's list of top 10 books to read. What surprised me most was discovering that Harold was Eli's fourth hire. He had been with Eli during the development of the theory and later the software they eventually sold. Harold was literally one of the OGs of the theory of constraints, and here I was having dinner with him. We're still good friends today. This was another one of those "how did I get here" moments. Getting training is one thing. Learning from someone who was one of the originals involved in developing a theory that changed the manufacturing world is something else entirely. And all of this happened because I had started making small 2-second improvements. My life kept getting better, more interesting, and more fulfilling, and that wasn't about to stop. Chapter 26, A Lean Summit to Remember. At some point, I was asked to travel to Manchester in the United Kingdom to visit a plant and see how I could help. This was my first time traveling to Europe, and I was quite nervous. But the trip went well, and I loved the United Kingdom. The next fall, the second Lean conference was going to be held in Ireland, and I hoped I could attend. Due to the size of the venue and the direction they were taking Second Lean, they were only allowing 100 people to attend. To my surprise, I was asked to be one of the 100 attendees. Out of thousands of people from all over the world who would have loved to go, I was invited. It was another moment where I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I gladly accepted and started making plans to attend the conference. This time, I wanted Jenny to come along, so we saved our money and made our reservations. The day came, and we drove to Dulles Airport, boarded the plane, and took off for Dublin, Ireland. By the time we landed, we'd been awake for about 24 hours, with only a few catnaps in between. Jenny and I were both exhausted, but we had plans to explore the opposite side of the island before heading to the conference. We rented a car, and since it was my first time driving in Europe, let's just say it was a learning experience. Despite that, we had a great time. Jenny and I visited several amazing places before heading to Northern Ireland, where the Lean Summit was being held. When we arrived, we checked into a beautiful resort. That first evening, there was a meet and greet, and I attended. With COVID having paused in-person events for years, this was the first summit in a long time, and it was great catching up with so many old friends. As I walked around, I felt somewhat intimidated by the sheer number of incredible lean thinkers and successful business professionals who were present. The next day, we dove right into the summit, which featured excellent presentations. The speakers were top-notch, and the material they covered didn't disappoint. Of course, as with anything in lean, there's always room for improvement. The highlight of the summit was the tour of a company called Seating Matters. We traveled there in 3 large buses, and the entire experience was dialed in perfectly. As we toured the company, we stopped at various stations where employees gave talks and presentations about their roles and the improvements they had made. The sheer number of improvements was mind-boggling, and what impressed me most was how involved everyone was. Some of my favorite presentations came from the sewing department. The ladies who ran that area had a fantastic sense of humor and a deep understanding of lean principles. Another highlight was the group hike. Nearly 100 of us went on a magnificent hike through the resort grounds. We passed beautiful streams, Irish farm fields wet with dew and glistening in the sunlight, and old buildings with stunning architecture. Jenny joined me on this hike, and it remains one of the most memorable ones I've ever been on. When the conference ended, I left feeling inspired. My excitement for lean continued to grow, and once again, I found myself surprised by how far I had come. Chapter 27, The 100 Book Challenge. Previously, I mentioned that as a child, I didn't enjoy reading. In my late teen years, I started to enjoy it more. But back then, reading 6 or 7 books a year felt like a significant accomplishment. After learning to see the waste in my life, I realized my daily commute seemed like a wasted opportunity. I wanted to figure out how to listen to audiobooks and take advantage of the 30-minute drive to and from work. It took a few iterations, but I eventually found a free app called Hoopla. All it required was a library card, and suddenly I had thousands of books at my fingertips. I started listening to books during my commute, but I didn't stop there. I kept making small improvements. I had seen where Paul could listen to books at double speed, so I slowly practiced until I could do the same. Many people were astonished when they heard how fast I listened to audiobooks, but once I honed the skill, it became second nature. Listening at double speed meant an 8-hour book could be finished in just 4 hours, a few commutes back and forth, and I could knock out an entire book. The first year I started, I shocked myself by reading or listening to 54 books. During that time, I kept improving my process. That may sound crazy, but everything is a process, including how you listen to or read books. Next, I began keeping notes on the books I read. If I heard something profound or wanted to remember something, I would record it using the Notes app on my phone. I also started rating each book. Over time, I made small improvements, like numbering the books in my Notes app, so I could quickly see how many I had read. Eventually, I found an app called Reading List, which allowed me to create a list of books I wanted to read. Every time I stumbled across a new book I didn't want to forget, I added it to that list. The app also tracked the number of books I completed and the total number of pages I read. It even allowed me to store and organize books by category. This was a significant improvement because, after reading so many books, it's easy to forget which ones you've already completed. I believe there are other apps out there with similar features, but most of them require a monthly subscription. The next year, I set a goal to read 75 books. I was spending a lot of time in the car traveling for work, which allowed me to get a lot of reading and listening done. Again, I surprised myself by just surpassing my goal. I read and listened to over 75 books. I covered topics on self-improvement, business, history, biographies, and anything else that caught my interest. The following year, I set what I thought would be an almost impossible goal: to read or listen to 100 books in a year. That goal required finishing 2 books a week, which was manageable some weeks, but nearly impossible during others. I spent a lot of time on the tractor and lawnmower, so my wife bought me a pair of RACYCOM earbuds. These earbuds allowed me to listen to books while working outside, which was a game changer. It significantly increased my learning time. In the end, it came down to the wire, but I managed to beat my goal by 1 book. When I reflected on it, I marveled at how I went from being a C and D student who hated reading to someone who could power through over 100 books a year. It all came back to making those small daily improvements, and I knew there was still more ahead for me. Chapter 28, Growing Lean Leaders. When we moved to the farm, my son Tommy quickly became my right-hand man. We were always working, and he learned to work hard. I was very demanding at the time, something I wasn't happy about, and later addressed in my What Makes You Happy document. I always told Tommy that if he could work for me, he could work for anyone. There was no question he grew up working hard. There were always animals to water and feed, or fences to fix. He was constantly helping me chase down some critter that had escaped, or running 200 yards up the hill to grab a tool for me. He helped me castrate piglets, move sick pigs, and clear debris from our washover bridge after a flood. He had seen me make hundreds of improvement videos, heard me talk about lean, and knew how much I loved it. But I never pressured him to adopt lean himself. When the day came for him to get his first job, it didn't take long before he started commenting on the waste he noticed. He worked several different jobs while in college, and at each one, he could point out inefficiencies. That, of course, made me happy. Tommy graduated from college with an accounting degree and quickly landed a job in corporate finance. Jenny and I were both proud of him and how he had grown into a fine young man. His strong work ethic paid off, even in an office role, and I never had to worry about how he was performing. What really got me excited was when he started coming home and describing the waste he saw in the accounting processes. All processes have waste, including those in office environments. Then he began sharing the small improvements he was making each day. Those incremental changes started to add up, and before long, he was shaving significant amounts of time off the tasks he was responsible for. This was yet another moment where I paused and thought, how did we get here? That old saying about children learning more from what you do than what you say must be true. Tommy was turning out daily improvements without me ever saying a word. From a dad's perspective, it doesn't get much better than that. Even as I write this, my daughter's just getting home from one of her first jobs. I can already tell she's going to be amazing. She has a deep love and respect for people. I look forward to seeing her enter the full-time workforce in a year or two and watching her flourish. Chapter 29. Write, improve, repeat. When I was in high school, I really enjoyed writing. In my mid-teens, I wrote a fiction novel by hand about an assassin. I still have that handwritten book tucked away in a box. Before going to sleep at night, I would pray that one day I could publish a book. Time moved on, life got busy, and I stopped writing. Then we moved to the farm, and it seemed like every other day something wild or amazing was happening. We had giant hogs knocking on the back door, trucks catching on fire, cows wandering off only to be found 6 months later, coyote dens right behind the house, tornadoes, wildfires, and floods. Something was always happening. And after a few years, I decided to write a book about our adventures. It took me about a year to get the book written. Then, I went through several iterations of reading it and making edits. At some point, I reached out to my friend David Long for his opinion on the title of the book. After that, my dad read the entire book and gave me feedback, which I incorporated. That process took another year or two. At this point, I was 3 years into the making of this book, and I was somewhat stuck. I needed a professional editor to review it and suggest changes. I didn't know any professional book editors, and I certainly didn't have the money to pay one. I had a friend and a family member who were both grammar and English professionals, but they didn't have the time to thoroughly review a 300-page book, and I couldn't afford to pay them either. The project stalled and sat dormant for several years. Every so often, I would get motivated, reread the book, and make minor edits, but it never progressed beyond that. 5 years after I started writing the book, I began experimenting with AI. I played around with AI to help me write. I would tell it what I wanted in a chapter, and it would generate the content. While that was impressive and fun, relying completely on AI to write a book left something to be desired. AI may eventually match the creativity of the human mind, but right now, I feel that any project entirely generated by AI with minimal human input lacks the depth that draws people in. I kept experimenting with AI, growing more impressed with its capabilities. My family and I enjoy cross-country travel, and after one trip, I decided to write a book on cross-country travel, covering all of the things you should consider, along with the do's and don'ts. It was a short book, but packed with great information. However, I found myself back at the same crossroads. How would I get it edited? I decided to use AI to edit the book. I gave it a command similar to edit this like a professional book editor would for grammar and language, but leave my voice and style intact. After experimenting and failing several times, I figured out how to get it to work. Next, I applied lean principles like single piece flow by giving the AI one chapter at a time to edit. Before I knew it, I had a fully edited book. I was ecstatic. I then went to Kindle Direct Publishing and worked through all the steps to publish it. I had no idea what I was doing, but after 6 or 7 hours of trial and error, I finally uploaded everything. A few days later, I published my first book, titled On the Road Again, Your Cross-Country Travel Handbook. I couldn't believe it. After all this time, I had finally published my first book. I didn't stop there. I kept improving how I wrote, how I interacted with AI to help me edit, and how I published with Kindle Direct. I refined the process to the point where I could write, edit, and publish an entire book in a month or less. This is my 7th book, and leading up to this, I had published 6 books in just 4 months. One of the best books I wrote was for my wife. About a year before I published my first book, I read a book where an author wrote down something he was thankful for about his wife every day for a year. That idea intrigued me, and I decided to take on the challenge. Every night, I wrote down something I was thankful for about my wife, whether it was something as simple as making the bed or holding my hand. I never told her I was doing this and planned to give her my notes on Thanksgiving Day. When I figured out how to write books quickly, I decided to turn those notes into a book instead. I compiled all 365 entries, corresponding each one with a specific day of the year. For each day, I included something I was thankful for about her, along with words of affirmation, a Bible verse, and other positive reflections. On Thanksgiving, I presented her with the book. Now every day, she can wake up and read how much I love and appreciate her. As for the farm book I had worked on for so long, that finally got published as well. It's called Life Out There. One of the best improvements my wife and I made during this journey was unplugging the TV. So much of our time and talent had been wasted watching shows we didn't even care about. At some point, I reflected on my journey. I went from being an unpublished author, stuck on a single book for 5 years, to having 6 books published in 4 months. How did that happen? The answer was simple. I kept trying to improve. There's nothing special about me. There's nothing that makes me better than anyone else. I just kept trying to improve. Chapter 30. Building Success 2 Seconds at a Time. Compared to others, my accomplishments may seem minimal, but for me they have been astonishing. I went from being a supposed expert in lean to realizing I didn't know nearly as much as I thought. Through time, perseverance, and dedication, I began to see the true power of lean. These changes led me to start a YouTube channel, which grew from 0 subscribers to over 1,250. My videos have been watched all over the world, garnering over 200,000 views. While those numbers might be small compared to other creators, they still place the channel within the top 15% of all YouTube channels. I've even had random people stop me in public and ask if I'm the lean farmer. It's the craziest thing. I went from being an individual contributor who had repeatedly tried and failed to break into management to someone who was promoted into management 4 times in 5 years. I have managed hundreds of people and overseen millions of dollars in budgets. Since I started embracing the power of lean and striving for continuous improvement, my salary has doubled. I've had the privilege of influencing large parts of the businesses I've worked for, and best of all, I've been able to encourage and help others grow in ways I never imagined. I've presented to senior leaders in billion-dollar companies, people I never thought I'd meet, let alone share information with. I went from rarely traveling within the United States to visiting 43 states, with plans to eventually reach all 50. Beyond that, I've now visited 3 continents, with a 4th planned for the upcoming summer. This year's second Lean Summit will be held in Argentina, and I've been invited back to attend. The travel has exposed me to lands and cultures I never imagined visiting, allowing me to grow in ways I couldn't have foreseen. Along the way, I've met incredible people from around the world, many of whom have become true friends. I went from someone who rarely read to someone who now reads over 100 books a year. I transformed from someone who wasn't learning anything new into someone who is constantly, relentlessly learning. This shift changed my life, helping me grow both as a person and as a leader. I went from being a wannabe writer to a published author with multiple books. A process that once took me 5 years, I've now streamlined to just 1 month. From a book's conception to publication, I went from aimlessly wandering through life to having big dreams and taking deliberate steps toward achieving them. Most importantly, I improved my relationships with the people I love and care about. By consciously working on areas of my life that had disappointed me, I saw significant progress. I watched my wife and children grow and develop alongside me in ways I hadn't imagined. This process isn't fast, and it's not designed to be. Dave Ramsey, the famous financial guru, often says, "We sell crockpots, not microwaves." I believe this applies perfectly to the lean transformation process. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes time. I began this book with simple truths. If you want to make a tremendous difference in your life, start here. A personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Read these 3 books. 2 Second Lean. Lean Health, Lean Life. Don't worry about anyone else. Just focus on improving yourself. Even if you dedicate all your time and energy to eliminating waste in your life, you'll never fully eliminate it all. But that's okay. The key is to keep improving. This may sound like one of those infomercials where someone claims, if you buy this product for $19.99, it will change your life. But the crazy part is, it's true. And here's the best part. You don't have to pay $19.99. You can get all these books for free online. Listen to them as many times as you want. Apply what you learn, and your life will change completely. Of course, application requires effort. Even though the principles in these books are simple, they still require action. Let me boil it down to 3 basic points. Treat people with respect. Learn to see waste and eliminate it. Repeat. That's it. Treat people with respect, which can take many forms. Learn to see waste in your life and work to eliminate it. Keep doing this over and over, and your life will improve exponentially. Can 2 seconds change your life? Yes, it can make it infinitely better. My final question for you is, what are you waiting for? Why wouldn't you take that first step toward improving your life? The decision is yours, but I hope you'll join me on this great adventure. Appendix: What makes you happy document. Are you happy document? Vision statement: to love God with all my heart, soul, spirit, mind, and body, to grow in wisdom, reflect a Christ-like spirit, and continuously gain knowledge and understanding, to make small daily improvements in my heart, mind, and body. Mission statement: to serve those around me by continually improving everything I'm involved in. My identity: peacemaker. Being a peacemaker means actively seeking to resolve conflicts and promote harmony among individuals or groups. What makes me unhappy? I hate it when I meet someone new and then cannot remember their name. When I meet someone new, I will intentionally use their name in a sentence. I hate when I have to frequently work past my quitting time at work. I will work to delegate as much as possible and ensure we keep the proper number of support personnel. I hate when an animal gets out of the fence. I will invest in and use only the strongest fencing materials. I will work to use wooden fencing for cows and horses, and I will use my own creation of barrier walls and electric fencing for pigs. I hate that I start a project and don't completely finish it. I will strive to lay out plans before starting a project. I will purchase all the needed materials in advance, and I will not start another project until I complete the one I started. I hate how rough the driveway is. I will work to have the driveway paved or concreted by 2035. I hate that everyone on my team does not understand the essence of lean. I will continue to set an example for them and incorporate the 8 wastes into the morning meeting. I don't like that I have to depend on an outside job to support the family. I will continue to increase in wisdom, knowledge, and understanding by learning daily, writing, making videos, making new connections, and continuously improving everything about myself and all that I do. I will do this until I'm so successful that I no longer need to work for another company. I will accomplish this by 2027. I will read or listen to a book or presentation on a subject I am studying. I will become so successful in writing, speaking, making videos, and farming that I can leave the factory where I work. When I get stuck on a project at home or on the farm, I don't like to ask for help, and it causes projects to drag on or remain incomplete. I will humble myself and ask for help from family members and friends. Jenny. I will work on understanding what makes Jenny happy and what does not make her happy. I will treat Jenny like a 69 Z28 Rally Sport Camaro. I will not be short with her, take her for granted, or forget that she is a treasure given to me by God. I will be encouraging and supportive of Jenny's next career step. I will do this by encouraging Jenny and never limiting any of her dreams or desires. I hate making mistakes so much that when they happen, it bothers me to the point that it inhibits my performance. I will maintain a healthy concern for making mistakes, but I will not let mistakes hold me back or interfere with my performance or success. I hate how disorganized some areas of the house and farm are. Every day, I will focus on 3Sing and fixing what bugs me. I hate when I spend too much time on apps on my phone in the evening. I will spend my time writing, making videos, learning, or journaling. 1 Timothy 6:8. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. What makes me happy? Writing books about farming, lean, or journaling. Each week, I will spend time writing or journaling, accomplishing something that everyone says is too hard or cannot be done. I will never back away from a task solely because people say it cannot be done. Helping other people with anything they are struggling with. I will look for people who may be struggling, and if I can offer assistance, I will. Helping others learn and understand Lean, Six Sigma, and farming. I will continue to make videos, write, and speak on the subjects of Lean, Six Sigma, and farming, making improvements and then using those improvements. I will make a minimum of 1 improvement every day, raising animals on the farm from birth until they are taken to the processor. I will work to get our fencing corrected and the house projects completed so we can start to raise large animals by the end of 2025. Raising, watching, and studying pigs on the farm. I will work to have the hog improvements completed by the end of 2025 so we can start raising pigs again. Eating food that we grew or raised. We will plant our orchard by the end of 2025 and complete the raised garden beds by the end of 2025. Making videos, sharing videos, and having thousands of people watch those videos. I will try to publish 1 leaner farm video a week, reading and learning about any topic that interests me. I will continue to study and learn about topics that interest me. I will read portions of a book each day to increase my learning, and I will strive to complete 1 book a week. I love sitting in the woods, watching deer, and then killing a deer. I will ensure that I am ready for hunting season so I can enjoy hunting. I will continue to work on organizing my hunting gear, traveling to new places with Jenny. I will plan yearly trips with Jenny where we see new places and experience new things. Hanging out with lean friends. I will strive to attend one lean trip a year. I will stay connected with lean friends via Voxer and WhatsApp. Being really good at something. Expert. When I find a subject or topic that interests me, I will read, watch, and learn everything I can until I become an expert on the subject. Seeing the sunrise while doing morning chores. Whenever I'm doing chores early and the sun is rising, I will pause for a moment and soak up the beauty of the new day God is giving me. Having things cleaned and organized. I will clean and organize something each day. I will throw away something each day. During early summer, sitting on the front porch in the shade, watching the hay sway gently in the breeze. I will intentionally take time during the summer to enjoy sitting on the front porch. I will continue to work on improving the porch and front garden area. Dreaming with Jenny. I will spend time each week dreaming with Jenny. Hearing wind chimes during a light breeze. I will strategically place wind chimes in various locations on the farm. Daily healthy habits. Workout. I will strive to stretch or work out every day by stretching, rock climbing, biking, lifting weights, running, boxing, or other exercises. Eat fresh fruits and vegetables. I will eat multiple servings of vegetables and fruits each day. Get a minimum of 7 hours of good sleep. I will go to sleep each night in time to get a minimum of 7 hours of sleep. I will eat small meals at dinner to give my stomach a chance to rest at night, and I will not eat anything past 8 p.m. Follow the 8 laws of health. Fresh air. Do deep breathing exercises daily. In the winter, I will open windows slightly to air out rooms. I will avoid smoke, chemicals, room fresheners, and aerosol sprays. Water. Drink at least 65 ounces of pure, soft water daily. Nutrition. Avoid all refined foods. I will eat fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, and small portions of meat. Rest. Ensure adequate, restful sleep by eating an early light supper well before bedtime. Temperance. Abstain from all harmful indulgences, including sugar, caffeine, tobacco, alcohol, coffee, drugs, tea, except herbal tea, colas, and soft drinks. Sunshine. Get a minimum of 10 to 15 minutes of sunshine daily on the face and hands. Exercise. Get at least 10,000 steps a day. Trust in divine power. Put my faith and trust in God, remembering He has made every provision to forgive and cleanse all my past mistakes. Read or listen to a book or presentation on a subject I'm studying. I will listen to one book a week. Always put on the detective hat and ask why the body is responding the way it is. I will continue to learn about the body and maintain a questioning, inquisitive attitude. Laugh a lot. Each day, I will laugh and remember to be joyful and grateful. Work on having great posture. When I walk, I will focus on keeping my back straight and my shoulders back. When sitting at my desk, I will work on sitting up straight. Daily habits. Be out of bed by 6:30 a.m. Stretch or exercise immediately. Focus on 3-sing and fixing what bugs me. Work on writing or journaling each night. Work on understanding what makes Jenny happy and what does not make her happy. Make videos, write, and speak on the subject of lean. Read portions of a book each day to increase my learning. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Remember, you can make all the plans you want, but where you go and what you do is ultimately up to God. Big goals. Take Jenny on a dolphin experience by 2025. Investigate Discovery Cove. Consider the dolphin encounter at the Dolphin Research Center. Make Swim with Dolphin reservations in February 2025. Complete the Swim with Dolphins experience in June 2025. Grow your YouTube channel to greater than 2,000 members by the end of 2025. Complete and publish a minimum of one high-quality video per week. Reach 2,000 YouTube members by December 2025. Take a ride in a biplane by 2025. Research biplane companies. Ride in a biplane in May 2025. Go back to Japan by 2030. Become certified in live blood cell analysis by 2025. Begin taking classes toward live blood cell analysis in January 2025. Complete certifications by December 2025. Go on a mission trip to an Indian reservation in the Northwest by the end of 2025. Pray about which location God wants you to go. Seek out a mission team going to that area. Go on a mission trip to the Northwest in July 2025. Become a more sought-after speaker and writer than Joel Salatin by December 2025. Begin speaking on lean farming, lean manufacturing, and naturopathic topics. Travel to all 50 of the United States by 2028. Go on a Southwest cross-country trip in January 2020. Completed. Go on a Northeast trip in July 2025. Go on a West Coast trip in 2026. Take Jenny to Hawaii in 2027 for your anniversary. Take Jenny to Alaska in 2028. Memorize the entire book of Proverbs by 2027. Develop a structured plan for memorization. Climb Kilimanjaro. Climb Kilimanjaro with Jenny by 2028. Have a lean farm that people from all over the world want to visit. The farm will be a true working farm, but will be beautiful to see, smell, hear, and taste. Continue to make daily improvements on the farm. Build your innovative pig barrier. Build your innovative sunroom for water storage. Build the wood fence around the house. Complete the orchard and garden space. Fence the back pasture. Select the cow breed you want. Restart Fancy Hill Farm Day. Build your innovative chicken coop. Become so successful in writing, speaking, making videos, naturopathic medicine, and farming that you can leave your factory job by 2027. Every day, read, write, speak, or publish videos on lean, farming, clean eating, or homeopathic theories until you become an expert in those areas. Complete your certifications in 2025. Build a 25 feet by 50 feet greenhouse by 2030. The greenhouse will have wooden sides and beautiful glass. Continue to research and evaluate different greenhouse designs. By December 2029, finalize the greenhouse design. By March 2030, sign with a contractor to build the greenhouse. In May 2030, build the greenhouse. Buy land in Montana by 2030. Continue to study land in Montana. By December 2030, choose a property and begin the purchase process. Buy an adjoining piece of property and build a double brick wall house by 2030. Purchase the land, have double brick wall plans drawn up, select a contractor, build the house, swim with the pigs in the Bahamas by 2031. Research where and how to do this. Go swim with the pigs in the Bahamas by May 2031. Build a lake, put multiple cabins around it, and convert the house into multiple rentals by 2031. Buy a completely restored 1969 Camaro or 1957 Chevy by December 2032. Buy and rent out a minimum of 10 rental properties by 2032. Continue to research potential areas for rental properties or an Airbnb. Buy one additional property each year thereafter. Redo and pave the entire half-mile-long driveway by 2035. Have the driveway redone by December 2034. This will involve digging up and replacing pipes, regrading the driveway to correct water flow issues, and regraveling it. In May 2035, have the driveway paved. Never. I will never expose myself to unnecessary chemicals or food that could harm my body or mind. I will only drink water or tea. Never think that I cannot achieve my largest goals. Never forget that I can do all things through Christ. Never be afraid to respectfully speak my mind. Never forget to be respectful and humble. Never question why God is doing something. Instead, ask, "What do you want me to learn?" Never hold the kids back from achieving their goals or dreams. Never dwell on negative thoughts. Never make decisions out of fear. Sayings: Dad, change is inevitable. Growth is optional. Dad, persistence overcomes resistance. Dad, shoot at nothing, hit nothing. Unknown. Unbridled enthusiasm is a force multiplier. Churchill, I would have written you a shorter letter if I had more time. Trump, if you're going to think big. Granddaddy Reiner, once a man, twice a baby. Dave Ramsey, if you want to be rich, do what rich people do. Dave Ramsey, live like no one else today, so you can live like no one else tomorrow. Glenn Beck, it is a strength to ask for help. Russian proverb, train hard, fight easy. No battle is won in the study. What I learned from people. Jenny, don't be judgmental and persevere. Dad, love God, love your wife, love your family, love your country, and work hard. Mom, never give up. Walk with God. Granddaddy Reiner, watch another man while he works so you can learn what he is doing. Granny Reiner, be kind. Grandma, Grandpa Hunt, you can be physically fit at any age. Uncle TW, in his 70s, he had been diabetic since age 13 and had given himself over 70,000 injections, yet I never heard him complain. Jim Jennings, helping other people is powerful. Tom Burnett, patience. Paul Akers, improve every day, respect people, and people will be drawn to you. David Long, have a backup plan. Kyle Ward, think strategically. Chris Hotsey, invest in rental properties. Donald Trump, think big. Henry Ford, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Jerry Falwell, pray for the vision God gave you. Favorite Bible verses. 1 Peter 1:13. Wherefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and hope to the end, for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Proverbs 21:31. The horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord. Ecclesiastes 2:24. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. Ecclesiastes 3:13. And also that every man should eat and drink, and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. Proverbs 22:4. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Psalm 3:6. KJV. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me round about. Psalm 4:8. KJV. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. Psalm 33:17. KJV. An horse is a vain thing for safety, neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. Psalm 37:5. KJV. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. Proverbs 4:7. Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. Psalm 121:3 KJVS. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Proverbs 16:9 KJVS. A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. Ecclesiastes 4:6 KJV. Better is a handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit.